Hey guys, tonight we're opening the silk curtains on one of the most decadent, controlled and frankly strange corners of world history, Imperial China's bedroom politics. And you're not just visiting, you're about to become the emperor. Yeah, you sitting there in sweatpants. But before you get too comfortable on your jade throne, let's be clear, you probably won't survive this. Not just because of the scheming concubines, overambitious eunuchs and relentless rituals, but because managing a harem of thousands while balancing political power and ancient beliefs about sex could be more deadly than battle. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and drop your city and what time it is where you are. I'm curious where all my time-travelling emperors are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're reclining in the Hall of Mental Cultivation, the Emperor's private quarters deep within the Forbidden City. The air smells faintly of sandalwood and lamp oil. Outside, court officials are still scurrying like ants beneath the blood-orange dusk. But in here, everything slows. Your night isn't about reports or rebellion. It's about the roster. And yes, there's a literal bedroom roster. Your concubines, numbering in the thousands during peak dynasties like the Tang and Qing, are catalogued, ranked and rotated with bureaucratic precision. A select few get summoned each night. The selection isn't random. Oh no. It's a process involving wooden name tags stored in a tray called the Yupai, each inscribed with a woman's name and kept chilled in silver basins. Eunuchs pick them up, announce your choice, and then, brace yourself, they carry the chosen concubine in a silk-covered blanket to your bedchamber. Yep, carried like a sleepy burrito, to make sure she doesn't sneak in poison, weapons, or pregnancy-enhancing charms. And she better be healthy. Before she even makes it to you, she's been inspected, bathed, perfumed, and often judged by a physician to ensure she's not secretly menstruating. Because in traditional Chinese medicine, that was a big cosmic no-no. Everything about imperial sex is wrapped in ritual, from the hour it occurs, always scheduled around lucky times, to the direction the bed faces. You, the son of heaven, must channel harmony through your essence. This isn't just pleasure, it's politics, metaphysics, and a full-time job. It's hard to imagine now, but for many emperors, the act of sex wasn't even for personal gratification. It was duty, a sacred obligation to balance the universe through intercourse. You're not just getting busy, you're maintaining cosmic order, and that pressure? Yeah, it piles up. You might have your favourite concubines, maybe the soft-voiced Lady Zhao or the feisty Lady Li, but you can't always pick them. You have to spread your yang energy strategically across the harem, matching yin and yang according to Taoist charts. Too much with one girl and your life force might weaken. Too little and the empire's rice harvest could fail. You think I'm exaggerating. Taoist sex manuals, some stretching back to the Han Dynasty, warned against reckless indulgence. Too much climax, they said, drained your jing, your vital essence, and could bring about your early death. Sleep with moderation or die sexy. Of course, not every emperor obeyed. Some practically held record-breaking sex marathons like Emperor Wu of Jin, who supposedly dropped dead while mid-coitus. A fact? Maybe. A moralistic tale passed down by disapproving Confucian historians? Also likely. Scholars still debate whether these death-by-lust stories were true, or just warnings about the dangers of decadence and distraction from proper governance. It's the ancient version of a tabloid headline, Emperor found dead with favourite concubine, but written in calligraphy on bamboo scrolls. So here you are, lying back on brocade pillows while a concubine bows before you, eyes lowered, hands trembling slightly, not necessarily with fear, but with calculation. Because for her, this isn't just a night of intimacy, it's a potential promotion. A single pregnancy could mean elevation from a low-ranking maid to noble mother of a future emperor. But don't get too comfortable. That same pregnancy could make her a target. Poisoned teas, suspicious miscarriages, disappearing servants, it's all part of life in the harem, and it's your job to keep track of it all, or delegate that task to a clever eunuch who probably knows more about your sex life than you do. The harem isn't some free-for-all either, there's a strict hierarchy. The empress stands at the top, followed by imperial consorts, noble concubines, and then the long list of barely seen women whose lives revolve around the hope of a single night with you. Some will live and die in the palace without ever being summoned. Others will rise meteorically, like Consort Yang, whose beauty was said to make flowers blush, and whose favour with Emperor Xuanzong sparked jealousy, war, and eventually rebellion. That's the kind of emotional stakes we're talking about. Want a quirky twist? The Emperor didn't even get to initiate things on a whim. He couldn't just say, hey, I'm in the mood. Sex was logged in official court records. Yes, that means bureaucrats kept a detailed account of who you slept with and when, like a cosmic HR department. These records mattered for genealogy, succession, and even tax purposes. Having a legitimate heir wasn't just about preference, it was a matter of state. And of course, surrounding all this was the heavy air of ritual. The Imperial bedroom was silent but for the rustle of robes, the distant clang of bronze bells marking the hour, and the faint murmur of prayers to the ancestors. You'd think with all the pressure, the act itself would be tense, maybe even awkward. And it often was. For the concubine, one misstep could mean banishment. For you, a scandal. Yet somehow, within these tight margins, passion occasionally bloomed, though it often came with strings attached. So as you lie there, blinking up at a carved dragon hovering above your canopy bed, consider this. Absolute power might let you summon beauty at will, but pleasure here isn't simple. It's political theatre, it's metaphysical ritual, it's personal danger. You've got 3,000 women vying for your attention, but not one person you can trust fully, except maybe that one old eunuch who's been with you since you were 10, and even he's been known to gossip. And this is just your first night. You wait to the scent of lotus blossom lingering in the air and the gentle tapping of bronze bells outside the window screens. Morning light filters through the silk curtains, golden and diffuse. The concubine is already gone, whisked away by eunuchs before dawn to prevent any unauthorized loitering or the possibility of tampering with Imperial bloodlines. She'll be examined, debriefed, and returned to her designated quarters. You, meanwhile, stretch out in the centre of the enormous bed, feeling both godlike and oddly hollow. It's another day in the life of the Emperor, and you're already behind schedule. Today's business is not with ministers or border conflicts, but with something far older and harder to control, your own mortality. You've heard the rumours. Emperors don't just die of illness or assassins. They fade away, drained by desire, and worn thin by centuries of ritual. You don't want to be remembered as another exhausted ruler found sprawled across silk sheets, lips blue, with a scroll of Taoist sex teachings curled in your hand. So you do what so many before you have done, you consult the alchemists. They arrive in sweeping robes, smelling of ash and dried herbs, carrying jars of glowing powders and scrolls inscribed with looping symbols. Their pitch is always the same. Immortality lies not in stone or sword, but in your own body. Harness your jing, they say. Refine your essence, control your urges, and most importantly, don't spill your seed too often. That's where your power lies. You're skeptical, but not dismissive. After all, you've read about Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, unifier of China, absolute powerhouse of paranoia and ambition. He was obsessed with immortality. The man ordered the construction of a massive necropolis guarded by 8,000 life-sized terracotta soldiers, just in case the afterlife required backup. He also reportedly died after ingesting mercury pills, an ironic twist, considering mercury was supposed to make him live forever. And yet you get it. The idea of death coming for someone with divine blood seems ridiculous. You're the axis between heaven and earth, the literal son of heaven. How can the natural world touch you? Unless, of course, you're leaking your life force nightly into embroidered pillows and overworked concubines. So, you study. The Taoist texts from the Han and Tang dynasties are especially illuminating, if also confusing. They describe immortality as a kind of internal war, battles between yin and yang, semen and breath, desire and discipline. You learn about the practice of fangzhongshu, the arts of the bedchamber, where sex is treated not as pleasure, but as medicine and ritual. According to these guides, ejaculation is a loss, but intercourse without release, that's mastery. You're meant to draw out the yin energy of the woman, absorb it, circulate it through your own body, and emerge more virile than before. Basically, tantric sex, but with added bureaucracy. The pressure to perform this balance is enormous. The court physicians track your vitality, and your closest eunuchs, who have their own whispered access to secret texts, remind you not to waste the dragon's essence. In a strange way, even your desire has been nationalized. You begin to wonder if pleasure is just another mask for work. One fringe theory you encounter suggests that sexual energy can be redirected to fuel magical abilities, clairvoyance, prophetic dreams, even flight. You don't really believe it, but part of you wants to. Especially when you hear that some emperors tried to prolong their lives by sleeping with virgins, particularly young ones, thinking it would renew their yang. That rumour swirls especially hard around Emperor Wu of Han, who supposedly surrounded himself with teenage girls and avoided climax altogether. Did it work? Well, he lived into his 70s, which in ancient China might as well be immortality. But not all immortality quests are so clinical. Some are bizarre. One late Ming emperor reportedly employed a team of astrologers to chart the perfect time for sex to ensure maximum spiritual gain. That meant sleeping with concubines at 3:17 a.m. while facing east on the second Tuesday of a lunar month. If that doesn't kill the mood, nothing will. Still, death looms. You've heard about rulers who tried to cheat it only to accelerate their own decline. Mercury poisoning, celibacy-induced depression, ritual exhaustion. Some scholars argue that the obsession with immortality actually made emperors easier to manipulate. If the right alchemist promised eternal life, he could basically become the emperor's shadow. And in the back of your mind, you keep circling back to Qin Shi Huang. He didn't just build walls and armies, he chased eternal life across the entire empire. He sent fleets eastward to find the legendary Isles of the Immortals, where sages supposedly lived off dew and moonlight. None of the expeditions returned. Some say they fled to avoid punishment. Others say they found paradise and just didn't feel like sharing. Scholars today still debate whether these voyages were real, allegorical, or an elaborate PR campaign to hide the fact that the emperor was terrified of dying alone. As you sip a bitter tonic made of crushed pearls and deer antler, you start to see a truth no one says aloud. Sex and death are linked for emperors in a way that's almost poetic. You sleep with hundreds of women not to celebrate life, but to fight death. Every ritual, every guarded night, every breathless encounter. It's all a kind of gamble. If you win, you extend your life. If you lose, you get remembered as another cautionary tale like Emperor Ai, who was rumoured to be so besotted with his male lover that he ignored state affairs and was ultimately overthrown. Of course, no one will dare say any of this to your face. Your court will continue to bring you elixirs, young maidens, and celestial charts. Your eunuchs will still arrange midnight encounters like logisticians planning a campaign. And your alchemists will assure you that your essence is glowing. But you're starting to suspect the truth. The pursuit of immortality might be killing you faster than time ever could. You're lying awake again, not from worry, though there's plenty of that, but because your mind is busy spinning with diagrams of breath, arrows of energy, and swirling vortexes of yin and yang. You've been reading the Taoist sex manuals again, the really old ones that the eunuchs only bring out under strict orders. These aren't some dusty scrolls filled with pretty poetry, they're anatomical, esoteric, and deeply weird. One of them begins with a line that makes you blink. When the jade stalk enters the golden gate, the celestial dragon awakens. Right, so tonight you're going to awaken a dragon with your anatomy. You laugh softly, then stop, because even laughter feels like it might drain your energy. That's the thing about Taoist bedroom practices. They make everything feel sacred and slightly dangerous. According to these teachings, sex isn't just a pleasure or a way to make heirs. It's a metaphysical exercise. A chance to align yourself with the cosmos, to strengthen your spirit, and ideally to live forever. You've already met with your Taoist master, an old man with eyebrows so long they curl like calligraphy strokes. He's shown you where to press, when to breathe, and, most importantly, when not to finish. Ejaculation is death, he warns with a raspy whisper. Retention is immortality. So now, you're practicing the ancient art of dual cultivation. It's less of a romp and more of a slow, disciplined duel, like Tantric yoga performed in silence, with the pressure of heavenly balance looming over your bed. The goal is to have sex without climax, to circulate the aroused energy through your meridians like water through irrigation ditches. You're supposed to inhale deeply at the moment of peak sensation, lock your muscles, roll your eyes upward, and pull the seed back into the spine. Sounds romantic, right? Your concubine tonight is experienced. She's been trained for this. In fact, some women were specifically raised from childhood within Taoist sects just to become partners in this practice. They are not just lovers, they're energy batteries, carefully selected for their yin purity, their age, and sometimes even their star sign. Tonight's partner, Lady Ju, has skin like fresh porcelain and a way of moving that's more like a ritual dance than seduction. She bows, whispers a mantra you barely catch, and helps you into the proper position. This is less foreplay and more astronomy. The two of you move together slowly, deliberately, each thrust paired with an inhalation, each exhale meant to ground your essence. It's not just about holding back, it's about transforming the urge into vitality. Supposedly, if done perfectly, you can see visions, fly in dreams, or at least avoid gout for a few more decades. And Lady Jew, she's focused. Her eyes are half-lidded in trance, and she's murmuring things about jade palaces and dew on lotuses. It's beautiful, sort of, but it's also exhausting. Part of you starts to wonder, is this sex, or a very elaborate, high-stakes nap? There are even warnings in the text that overdoing this, yes, even sacred sex, can lead to loss of soul, spontaneous nosebleeds, and ghost sightings. One story claims that Emperor Liu An of the Western Han tried to force a girl to have ritual sex every night for a month, and she started levitating and weeping blood. Maybe apocryphal, maybe a ghost story told by court physicians to make you take a night off. Of course, you're not the only one who ever found these rituals overwhelming. There's a story about Emperor Cheng of the Han Dynasty, who was so committed to following Taoist bedroom techniques that he reportedly died trying to withhold climax with his favourite consort, Zhao Feiyan. Her beauty was legendary. Poets wrote that she danced on the palms of men and left no footprints, and he, poor fool, tried to ride that cosmic wave until his essence broke like a cheap vase. The irony? No heir, no immortality, just an embarrassing line in the historical record. But not all scholars buy these stories. Some say the idea that emperors practiced sex as spiritual cultivation was more legend than fact, a way for later dynasties to legitimize or romanticize decadent rulers. Others argue the opposite, that we've underestimated how seriously Taoist metaphysics shaped imperial policy, especially during the Tang and Song periods, when the blending of spirituality, medicine, and sex was especially dense. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, part genuine practice, part political theatre. You're starting to feel that theatre now. There's a eunuch stationed outside the curtain listening to the rhythm of your breathing. He'll log the encounter, check on your pulse later, and even record how many thrusts occurred. That's right, Imperial CSEO comes with performance metrics. And if that sounds invasive, wait until you hear about the essence reports that go directly to court healers. Too sluggish, and you might be prescribed rhinoceros horn powder or tiger bone wine. Too vigorous, and you might be banned from sexual activity for a week to preserve your chi. So as you lie here, Lady Jew resting beside you like a living statue, your limbs tingling with what might be energy, or maybe just exhaustion, you begin to grasp the weight of it all. This isn't passion, it's pressure. It's a choreographed ritual written in muscle tension and breath. And yes, it's kind of sexy in a mystic performance art kind of way, but it's also exhausting. There's no cuddling afterward, no whispered jokes, just silence. And the knowledge that you've either added one more drop of vitality to your cup, or accidentally tipped the whole thing over. As your Taoist master would say, each drop saved is a day extended. You're not entirely convinced, but in the quiet hours before dawn, you like to believe it might be true. You're sitting in the Hall of Supreme Harmony, pretending to listen as your ministers drone on about harvest quotas and provincial disputes, but your mind is still drifting back to last night's silent, breath-synchronized lovemaking. Or was it breath combat? Hard to say. Either way, it left you with sore legs and a vague sense that your spleen might have moved. But before you can dwell too long on your internal alchemy progress, there's a tap at your side and a discreet whisper. The eunuchs request your attention. You nod and rise with practiced gravity. Another meeting, another problem, but this one's happening behind screens. You know what that means. It's bedroom business. In the world of Chinese emperors, there's no true separation between the court and the bed. Politics doesn't stop when the silk robes come off. And right now, your gatekeepers to that intimate world, the eunuchs, have something urgent to report. Now let's talk about eunuchs. These men are your most trusted advisors, assistants, and occasionally secretaries of seduction. Their roles aren't just to shuffle paperwork and light incense, they are the very glue that holds your harem together. They've been surgically edited, yes, that kind of edited, to ensure absolute loyalty and, of course, to eliminate any chance that the imperial bloodline gets mixed. Their lack of equipment makes them trustworthy in theory, though in practice they've still managed to climb to immense power through sheer cunning. Inside your private hall, the lead eunuch bows low, his voice like parchment rustling. "Your Majesty, there was a disturbance last night in the southern pavilion." You raise an eyebrow. Disturbance is never a good word. Turns out 2 lower-ranked concubines got into a screaming match over whose yupai was more likely to be chosen this week. The fight escalated to broken porcelain, bruised cheeks, and one collapsed incense burner. These are the kinds of quiet battles that make up life in the harem. Simmering rivalries, jealousy over scheduling, and calculated attempts to get closer to you, the walking embodiment of divine power. And it's all managed by eunuchs. These men carry your orders, keep the concubines in line, and act as silent witnesses to your most private moments. They even take part in inspection rituals. Yes, they check the concubines before and after a nightly visit, ensuring cleanliness, confirming that no spells or poisons are hidden in garments, and noting any injuries or peculiarities. It's all very thorough, and, depending on your mood, either deeply comforting or completely creepy. Eunuchs aren't just glorified butlers, though. Some become power brokers. During the Tang dynasty, one eunuch named Gao Lishi was so powerful that he basically ran the court from behind the curtain. Another, during the Ming, commanded armies. Eunuchs controlled information flow, access to your person, and even sometimes falsified reports to protect their favourites or eliminate rivals. You think the ministers are scary? Try crossing a eunuch who knows every intimate detail of your schedule, preferences, and weaknesses. And let's not ignore the elephant, or rather the knife, in the room. Becoming a eunuch wasn't just about getting a job at the palace. It involved a painful, often crude operation done in unsanitary conditions with no guarantee of survival. Some were castrated as children by desperate families hoping to earn favour at court. Others did it voluntarily, chasing the dream of status, proximity to power and wealth. Because yes, a successful eunuch could amass enormous fortunes. He couldn't pass on a name or seed, but he could own land, influence appointments, and even help place an emperor on the throne. In a strange, twisted way, eunuchs lived both above and below society. They were mocked by scholars, feared by generals, and needed by everyone. Some were spiritual guides, others meticulous record keepers, and a few were manipulators of the highest order. And you live among them daily, entrusting them with the safety of your body, your lineage, and your throne. Kind of makes you wonder who's really in charge, doesn't it? One particularly quirky practice you've come to accept is the ritual of the bedtime escort. Each night a eunuch supervises your selected concubine's journey to your chambers. She's bathed, powdered, and wrapped in ceremonial silk. Then, here's the weird part, she's lifted and carried by 2 eunuchs like a sacred offering. Her feet are never to touch the ground during transit. This supposedly prevents her from being tampered with or bringing in evil energy. Also, it guarantees that no woman sneaks into your room uninvited, which actually has happened in the past. Legend has it that during the Song dynasty, a concubine faked her name tag and bribed a low-level eunuch to get in. She was found out later, but not before becoming pregnant. That scandal ended with several exiles, and the eunuch in question was not seen again. Of course, all this makes the eunuch's job more than logistical, it's spiritual too. They are seen as liminal figures, not quite male, not quite female, occupying a third mysterious space that makes them perfect intermediaries. Some even become respected shamans or interpreters of omens. If a eunuch dreams of blood, it might signal war. If he dreams of peaches, it could mean a birth. Dreams are recorded, analysed, discussed in morning briefings. You smile, remembering the time one old eunuch insisted that a dream about frogs meant you should avoid eating fish for a month. You humoured him. Then a rival noble choked to death on a cart bone. Coincidence? Maybe, maybe not. There's still debate among modern historians about just how much power eunuchs wielded. Some argue they were scapegoats for broader systemic failures, blamed when dynasties collapsed or emperors became decadent. Others point to hard evidence, edicts signed, wars launched, and empresses chosen under eunuch guidance. Either way, their presence was inescapable, and you, like every emperor before, depend on them. Back in the present, the lead eunuch concludes his report and bows. You thank him, ask for the 2 feuding concubines to be assigned meditation duties, and then you pause. "Bring me Lady May tonight," you say softly. The eunuch nods, makes a discreet note, and backs away into the shadows. Another name added to the scroll, another night orchestrated, another secret kept. And as you return to court business, nodding at a proposal for canal repairs, you can't help but marvel at the strangeness of your reality. You are the most powerful man in the world, and your knights, Your most intimate personal moments are scripted, supervised and recorded by a staff of surgically altered bureaucrats with better memory than any of your generals. Somewhere outside a bell rings 3 times. A concubine's bath begins, and you wonder, just for a moment, what it would be like to be normal. It's late afternoon, and the light is beginning to soften into that honeyed glow that makes even the stone lions of the courtyard look drowsy. You finished court early, one of the rare perks of being emperor when you feel like skipping the details of regional grain disputes. Instead, you're headed toward the western wing of the palace, where someone has been waiting all day. Her name is not recorded in public documents, though everyone knows who she is. She is the most powerful woman in the palace, second only to you, and in some ways far more dangerous. She is the Empress Dowager. She doesn't rise when you enter. She remains on her carved rosewood throne, her expression unreadable behind layers of powder, jewels, and perfectly arranged disinterest. It's an art form, appearing both unimpressed and unchallengeable. Her fingers rest lightly on a small carved phoenix, and her lips twitch upward just slightly. She's pleased to see you, or amused. With her, it's often hard to tell. Tonight, you're not here as her son, stepson, or distant relative, depending on how the dynasty lines were arranged. You're here as emperor, facing the matriarch who once held, and may still hold, the real reins of power. And she, as always, is testing you. The Empress Dowager knows every rule of the palace. She helped write some of them. She's navigated decades of intrigue, fended off assassins, silenced rivals, and strategically placed her favourites in the harem to control your father, or your brother, or you. In her presence, even the boldest generals bite their tongues. And yes, once upon a time, she was also just a concubine. Clever, young, ambitious, and very, very lucky. You're thinking about all of that as you sip the tea she offers. Osmanthus, light and sweet, but possibly symbolic. Everything with her is symbolic. You remember the stories about Empress Dowager Cixi, who essentially ruled China from behind a curtain for nearly half a century. She started as a low-ranked concubine, bore a son, and manipulated her way into regency with unmatched political precision. When male ministers objected to her involvement, she literally sat behind a silk screen during court meetings and spoke her will through intermediaries. Power without ever having to be seen. Cixi also wielded power in the bedchamber, or rather through it. She decided who saw the emperor and when, especially if the emperor was too young or too ill to make those decisions himself. There are whispers that she sometimes arranged visits from specific concubines, not for their beauty, but for their families, noble lineages that could be kept close or kept down depending on her whims. Rumour has it she even handpicked bed testers, women who would warm the emperor's bed before the actual concubine arrived, under the pretense of checking the temperature. Imagine that job title. Scholars debate whether Cixi was a monster or a misunderstood genius. Some called her a tyrant who diverted funds to remodel palaces, while foreign powers loomed at the gates. Others say she was a savvy operator, the only one holding the fragile Qing court together, while the world outside modernised at terrifying speed. The truth, like everything in the palace, probably lies somewhere in the folds of her embroidered sleeves. You're not Cixi's son, but the Empress Dowager across from you has the same energy. She can destroy a man with a sigh, and when she leans in to speak, it's not gossip, it's strategy. "You've been favouring Lady May lately," she says softly, eyes fixed on your teacup. You pause. There it is, the real reason she's summoned you. She's been watching, calculating, perhaps even interrogating the eunuchs you trust. Nothing goes unnoticed in her part of the palace. She has a gentle nature, you say carefully. She has a dangerous uncle, she replies just as carefully. And just like that, the entire room shifts. You're no longer talking about preference or romance. You're talking about court politics, factional alliances, and the terrifyingly real possibility that too much time spent with the wrong woman could tip the balance of power. In the Imperial court, desire is dangerous not because of what it satisfies, but because of what it promises. An emperor's affection is a currency. Every time you favour someone, you're investing in a family, a faction, maybe even a future rebellion. It's no wonder that the Empress Dowager, once a concubine herself, understands this better than anyone. She is the living example of what a clever woman can do with limited access to power and a brilliant sense of timing. And she knows, probably better than you, how the harem works behind the walls. She's likely placed her own favourites among the concubines. Women who report back to her, who watch what you eat, who smile and whisper things meant to steer you gently in her preferred direction. You think you're in control of your nights, but more than once you've woken up feeling like the pawn in someone else's game. Still, you're emperor, at least officially, and you remind her of that with a small deliberate smile. I'll keep your concerns in mind, you say, rising, but I trust my judgment. She doesn't respond at first. Then ever so slowly she bows her head, less a sign of submission than acknowledgement. The conversation is over, but the war continues. As you walk back to your quarters, past marble courtyards and flickering lanterns, you realise just how much of your sex life is not about passion, but control. It's not just about who lies in your bed, it's about who arranged for them to be there, and what ripple that choice will send through the palace. In this world, the Empress Dowager is the grand conductor of desire, not by seduction, but by surveillance. Later that night, Lady May joins you as requested. She's beautiful, kind, and just shy enough to be endearing, but you can't shake the echo of your earlier conversation. As she pours your wine and smiles at you beneath long lashes, you wonder, is she in love with you, or simply playing the role handed to her? Does she know what her uncle is planning? Does she care? You reach for her hand anyway, because even emperors get lonely. Even gods on thrones need someone to look at them like a man, not a title. But when she leans in, her perfume suddenly smells like osmanthus, and you wonder if that too is a message. The next morning you wake with a lingering ache in your chest, not from illness, not from exertion, but from something you can't quite name. Maybe it's the perfume again, osmanthus. It clung to Lady May's robe, her skin, even the sheets. Or maybe it's the aftertaste of suspicion curling in your stomach like spoiled wine. You've spent your whole life surrounded by women trained to please you, serve you and spy on you. And while last night was soft, almost sweet, it was also a reminder that in your world, intimacy is a performance, and trust is as rare as a snowflake in midsummer Beijing. Still, the day rolls forward. You attend to a few perfunctory scrolls, meet briefly with the Minister of Rites, and approve 3 garden redesigns that frankly all look the same. But by early afternoon, something odd catches your attention. A gift arrives, a tiny silk-wrapped parcel from the northern provinces, accompanied by a note from one of your more flamboyant nobles. The parcel contains a shoe, or rather, a slipper. And not just any slipper, a lotus shoe. It's almost too small to believe, no bigger than your palm. Decorated with delicate embroidery of butterflies and peach blossoms, the slipper is dainty, soft, and oddly disturbing. You hold it in your hand and think, someone's entire foot used to fit in this. And not just fit, was trained, bound, reshaped to fit. All for beauty, all for desire. Foot binding. The term alone makes your toes curl. It began centuries ago, a twisted expression of elegance that became a cultural standard, particularly among the elite. The process started when a girl was as young as 5. Her feet were soaked in warm herbs, her toes folded under, and the entire foot was tightly bound to break the arch and reshape it into a lotus. A perfect foot was ideally 3 inches long. They called them golden lotuses. You call them horrifying. Still, for emperors and aristocrats, lotus feet were considered the pinnacle of eroticism. The smaller the foot, the more refined the woman. The more she limped, the more she wobbled, the more effort it took for her to move, the more desirable she became. It was beauty through suffering, fragility as fetish. And make no mistake, it was a fetish. You've heard the stories. Emperors who requested their concubines walk barefoot on silk, just to watch the imprints their bound feet made. Some demanded their concubines wear nothing but their embroidered lotus shoes during private audiences. There are even legends, some whispered, some written, of rulers who preferred to never see the foot unwrapped, preserving the mystery like some sacred scroll. One particularly strange anecdote involves an emperor from the late Ming who collected the unwashed bindings of his favourite concubines and stored them in lacquered boxes, perfumed and catalogued like scrolls of poetry. Whether it was the scent, the idea of devotion, or just the sheer oddity of the practice is unclear. But it says something about how obsession was nurtured, even exalted, behind palace doors. But you, sitting on your throne, holding this soft, silent shoe, you're uneasy. Because while part of you understands the allure, who doesn't want something unattainable? Another part of you sees the madness in it. These women, born into a world where the shape of their feet determined their future, had no choice. Bound feet meant they couldn't run, couldn't dance freely, couldn't stand for long. It made them dependent, graceful, and most importantly to those in power, contained. The practice was never mandated for palace women, yet many volunteered, or were volunteered by their families, to undergo the binding ritual. To be considered for concubinage, girls had to conform to the emperor's taste, and if small feet were the trend, then broken bones were just part of the audition. You've seen the files, the detailed lists of potential concubines, including not just their height, family rank, and skin tone, but their foot size, arch tightness, and walking grace. This wasn't selection, it was curation. Of course, not every emperor indulged in the foot fetish. Some rebelled against it quietly, preferring women who could ride horses, dance without falling, or walk beside them in the garden without leaning on a cane. During the Yuan dynasty, when Mongol rulers held power, foot binding was looked down upon. They favoured robust women with strong bodies, warrior blood over wilting flowers, but by the Ming and Qing it had roared back into popularity. Some scholars argue this was about cultural anxiety, a way to reassert control and tradition in times of social upheaval. Others say it was simply the natural endgame of aesthetic obsession. Even today debates rage on. Was foot binding about beauty, control, class, or all of the above? Some historians emphasise the agency of the women involved, suggesting that some chose it willingly for the status it brought. Others argue that calling it a choice is ridiculous when the alternative was poverty, shame, or exclusion. In your palace, it's just another sign that even beauty comes at a price, and women have always paid more. You set the lotus shoe aside and dismiss the eunuch who delivered it. Later that evening, as you take a walk through the jasmine garden, you see one of your concubines approaching. She's young, probably barely past her 15th year, and her gait is delicate. Too delicate. You watch her walk with that careful, slow swaying motion, as if every step is both effort and performance. When she bows, you catch the glint of tiny silk shoes beneath her robe. Peach blossoms, just like the ones gone to the gift. You ask her name, she says it softly, Lan Er. And then you do something unexpected. You ask her to sit beside you, not walk, not bow, not perform, just sit. She's confused, maybe nervous, but she complies, and together you watch the koi swim in slow circles through the moonlit pond. Her hand trembles slightly in her lap. "Your shoes," you say gently. "Do they hurt?" She pauses, looks at you, and then, with a voice no louder than a breath, says, "Yes." It's the first honest answer you've heard all day. You don't sleep much that night. Not because of discomfort or nightmares or state affairs, though those would be good excuses, but because you're thinking about shoes. Not your own, of course. You haven't tied your own laces or fastened your embroidered slippers in years. No, you're thinking about Lan Er and the thousands of others like her. Women trained from childhood to move like swans and break like porcelain. Your bed is large, warm and guarded on all sides, but tonight it feels like a quiet stage. A little too quiet. You roll onto your side and eye the wooden box on your nightstand. It contains the yupai, the name tags of concubines waiting for selection. There are hundreds of them, maybe thousands, each lacquered and labelled, stored in silver trays, rotated, cooled and cleaned daily by your eunuchs. Most of the names you recognise only vaguely. They arrive like wind chimes in a storm, delicate, interchangeable and temporary. But each of them, in theory, gets a chance. Here's how it works. Each night, the Court of Internal Affairs, yes, that's a real department, delivers the name trays to your sleeping quarters. The tags are sorted by rank. The Empress at the top, then Imperial consorts, noble ladies, talented women and so on, all the way down to the lowly attendants. Even the titles feel like a game or a marketing campaign. Talented woman sounds more like a stage name than a government rank. But here it determines who gets a seat, who gets a servant, and who gets a chance at immortality through motherhood. You're expected to select one, or sometimes two, name tags each evening. The eunuchs note your choices, deliver the lucky women to your chamber, always wrapped like dumplings in ceremonial blankets, and record the encounter in the Imperial log. Yes, there's an actual log. A little red book where your intimate history is written down, complete with dates, names, and in some eras, even details of the interaction. Don't worry, no steamy confessions. Mostly just who arrived, how long they stayed, and whether there were any auspicious signs. Because the goal isn't just pleasure, it's reproduction. Your virility is the empire's insurance policy. The more sons you have, the better your dynasty's chances. And yet, it's not so simple. The timing of each visit is calculated around astrology, your health, and the woman's fertility cycle, sometimes tracked through pulse readings and occasionally wild guesses. You might be in the mood on a Tuesday, but if the court astrologer says your yang is in conflict with the moon's water spirit, you're waiting until Thursday, or next month. It's not just the scheduling that gets ridiculous, it's the bureaucracy. In some dynasties, concubines had to register their menstrual cycles with eunuchs. Yes, you read that right. A ledger of periods, tracked and updated like a weather chart. This was supposedly to avoid impure nights, but everyone knew it was also about paternity control. You didn't want a concubine showing up pregnant after 3 months without having been summoned. That raised questions, dangerous questions. Of course, the Empress had her own scheduling privileges. In theory, she could donate nights to favoured concubines or veto others she didn't trust. She also had the privilege of visiting you, a rare reversal of roles. But even that was ritualised. She had to send word in advance, dress in specific ceremonial robes, and be escorted by eunuchs. Nothing in your life, not even love, happens without a form. The system, while absurdly complicated, was meant to be fair, at least on paper. Every woman got a rotation, every title had its moment. But you know the truth? Fairness is for stories. In reality, favourites get more knights, more gifts, more sons. A clever concubine might bribe eunuchs to accidentally shuffle her tag closer to the top. Others flatter the Empress or spy on rival girls to win a precious edge. And then there's the real nightmare, not being chosen at all. Some concubines spend their whole lives in the palace without ever seeing the Emperor's bed. They come in at 15 full of hope and carefully rehearsed etiquette, and by 30 they're still waiting in silk robes they've outgrown, waiting through endless lantern festivals and birthday rituals and spring banquets where you don't even remember their names. Eventually they're transferred to lower duties, muse, embroidery, or temple service. It's like early retirement, but with way more incense. You once heard of a woman who wrote a secret diary in the margins of prayer scrolls, documenting every night she was passed over. She eventually became a Buddhist nun inside the palace walls, shaving her head and renouncing desire, but still sleeping with the candle your name had lit. One quirky twist to all this. Some emperors took it very seriously. The Yongle Emperor of the Ming dynasty reportedly had every concubine's cycle and last encounter recorded in tiny calligraphy on scrolls the length of a dining hall. His obsession with precision was so intense that court officials began calling him the Great Scheduler. Behind closed doors, he believed divine order required exact timing, and that included sex. But the real kicker? There were nights when you didn't get to choose at all. Sometimes the Empress Dowager made the decision, or the astrologers, or the Bureau of Ceremonial Affairs. Imagine being told as the most powerful man in the realm that you are scheduled for intercourse with someone you barely know, because Jupiter and the rice harvest have agreed it's optimal. That's not love, that's logistics. Tonight, though, the tray is in front of you. A quiet moment of Imperial agency. You run your fingers over the name tags. Each one is smooth, cool, anonymous. Except one, Lady Lan Eyre. Her name sits heavy in your palm. You hesitate. Choosing her again so soon will send a message. To the Empress Dowager, to the other concubines, and especially to the eunuchs who log everything. It will spark whispers, rivalry, maybe even resentment, but not choosing her, that's political too. In the end, you don't choose. You set the tray aside and lie back in bed, staring at the ceiling carved with dragons and clouds. Let them gossip. Let the records show a blank night. Even emperors need a pause. Dawn comes softly, sliding across the stone floor in hazy gold, catching on the trailing hem of a curtain and the lacquered legs of the dressing table. You're already awake when it arrives, staring blankly at the carved canopy above your bed, where clouds and cranes swirl forever in wood. A rare empty night, and still you didn't sleep well. There's something disorienting about going off script. The eunuchs don't quite know how to react when you break the rotation. You can sense it in their polite confusion, in the way they ask, "Does your Majesty require the tray returned?" as if afraid you might change your mind. You didn't, but the silence was deafening. So today, you distract yourself the old-fashioned way, with books, Not state documents, not court reports, though you'll get to those. No, today you reach for the novels and scrolls tucked away in the Imperial library. Secret pleasures bound in faded silk, stories inked by candlelight long before you were born. Tales of love, intrigue and indulgence that have somehow survived wars, reforms and dynastic turnovers. Your favourite? Dream of the Red Chamber. Now you've probably heard of it. One of the 4 great classical novels of Chinese literature. An epic labyrinth of aristocratic romance, poetry and deep psychological pain. But if you've never read it sprawled out on an imperial chaise with your outer robe half undone and a bowl of lychees at your elbow, you haven't really lived it. And tonight, we're doing just that. Set in the crumbling grandeur of a noble family, Dream of the Red Chamber is essentially a high-drama, slow-burn look into the lives of women trapped in luxury. You recognise the world immediately. The palatial garden walks, the silken layers of etiquette, the simmering tension beneath smiles. But what makes it addictive isn't the setting, it's the emotion. These aren't cardboard women sighing in moonlight. These are fierce, complex, jealous, grieving, tender-hearted heroines who waged emotional war with a fan flick or a perfectly chosen verse of poetry. It's like palace reality TV written by a philosopher with a broken heart. The story centres on Jia Baoyu, a young nobleman born with a piece of enchanted jade in his mouth, because of course, and his tangled relationships with 2 very different women, the dreamy melancholic Lin Da-yu and the stable, graceful Xue Baochai. On the surface, it's about courtship, inheritance, and the slow rot of a wealthy household. But beneath it, it's all desire. Subtle, aching, unspoken desire. Reading it feels almost dangerous. Not because it's scandalous, though parts definitely are, but because it's familiar, too familiar. The emotional games, the layered conversations, the strategic illnesses and weaponized poetry. Your concubines could have written this book themselves. Sometimes you wonder if they've memorized it as a survival manual. And honestly, wouldn't blame them. You recall one scene vividly. Baoyu slips into the women's quarters, a forbidden space for even a noble son, and lies beside Dayu under the shade of wisteria. They talk about dreams, about death, about how love might not survive past the garden wall. There's no kiss, no scandal, just vulnerability so sharp it cuts. And you think, when was the last time someone looked at me like that? Not with fear, not with calculation, just truth. You shift in your seat, the story weighing heavier than expected. It's strange, isn't it? That a novel, a work of fiction, can capture something you've never fully had. Not with Lady May, not with Lanare, not even with your Empress, not really. You've had nights of laughter, sure. Bodies beneath silk, whispered promises. But something raw, something equal, that's harder to find. And you're not the first emperor to be haunted by this book. It was banned in parts of the Qing dynasty, seen as subversive, too emotionally honest for a world built on stoicism and ritual. But that didn't stop palace women from sneaking pages under their pillows. Some eunuchs were known to recite passages aloud during bath time, their voices echoing off marble as concubines pretended not to cry. Even some emperors secretly admired Baoyu's rebellion, the way he favoured affection over duty, poetry over power. There's scholarly debate, of course. Was Dream of the Red Chamber a thinly veiled critique of Qing society, a subtle protest against arranged marriages and stifling gender roles? Or was it just one man's epic diary of heartbreak dressed in metaphor? The author, Cao Shuiqin, never finished the final chapters, and scholars have been arguing about their meaning for centuries. Some believe the unfinished ending is intentional, a literary mirror of how desire often ends. Unresolved, aching, unfinished. And that ache, you feel it now. You close the book and gaze across the room. The palace is quiet at this hour, too late for court and too early for supper. Just you, the drifting incense, and the endless murmur of lives happening around you. Hundreds of concubines, each in her own room, waiting. Some writing poetry, some weaving, some maybe rereading the same lines you just did and wondering if you'll visit them tonight. Sometimes when you walk past their quarters, you catch a verse drifting from behind a screen. A soft voice reciting, "In dream, I return to that fragrant land where falling petals cover the ground." You don't interrupt, you just listen. Because in a place like this, where every touch is logged, every glance weighed, poetry is the closest thing to freedom. And stories, they're the only safe way to tell the truth. You wonder how your story will be remembered. Will you be another name on a scroll, a footnote in someone else's memoir, or will a concubine years from now whisper your name in a poem about a night that never quite ended? You set the scroll back on its lacquered stand. The light is fading now, deepening into amber. Somewhere outside the peacocks are calling. The garden waits, and you, strangely enough, feel a little more human than usual. Not because of power, but because of a story. The rustle of silk is as familiar as the clink of jade hairpins by now. You hear it everywhere in the gardens, in the corridors, echoing from behind carved wooden screens. But it takes on a different edge tonight. Sharper, more deliberate. You can feel it even before your eunuch whispers, "There's unrest among the concubines, Your Majesty." Of course there is. You've broken the schedule, deviated from the sacred rotation, ignored names that were supposed to be chosen, and now the palace harem is shifting, not with open rebellion, but with whispers, glances, and quiet war. To the outside world, the Imperial harem is a dream, a lavish constellation of beauty, grace, and feminine power orbiting the emperor like stars around the moon. But you know better. The harem is a kingdom within a kingdom, a place of shifting alliances, covert sabotage, and ambitions as sharp as hairpins. And when you favour one woman more than others, or worse, ignore too many in a row, the balance tilts. You step into the inner garden where the higher-ranked concubines take their evening walks, and you can feel the tension in the air like a storm about to snap. The women walk in carefully spaced clusters, each surrounded by their maids and eunuch chaperones. Every movement is choreographed. The flick of a fan, the turn of a head, the arch of an eyebrow. But behind the elegance, there's calculation. Near the pavilion, Lady Gia, one of your imperial consorts and a woman known for her icy charm, gives you a lingering bow, not deep enough to signal respect, but not shallow enough to punish. A challenge, then. You know her type. She's seen her influence slip a little lately. She's noticed Lady Lan'Air getting 2 summons in the same week. She's noticed you skipping nights. And now she's reminding you, in that subtle, courtly way, that attention has a price. "Your Majesty seems pensive this evening," she says with that voice made of glass and honey. "I've had much on my mind," you answer. She smiles. Perhaps some company would lift the burden. There it is. The smile is a dagger sheathed in etiquette. You nod politely and move on, but she'll remember this exchange. Tonight, her maids will report your every word, and Lady Lan'Air, if she's smart, and she is, she'll be keeping her head down. Behind every painted face in this garden is a silent battlefield. These women live together, sleep in neighbouring rooms, eat side by side at banquets. But they're rivals, not for love, for survival. Because in this palace, being unseen is worse than being hate. The lowest ranked girls, the ones whose names barely get logged, start to vanish from conversation altogether. Their titles decay, their rooms grow cold, eventually they're transferred to religious service or ceremonial duties, their hair pinned into quiet submission. Forgotten. You remember one such girl, Lady Yin. She came from a noble family, bright-eyed, full of wit. You spoke to her twice, then never again. You never even knew she'd been reassigned, until you saw her lighting incense in the palace temple, head shaved, eyes downcast. When she looked up just for a second, her gaze was unreadable. Not grief, not anger, just distance. You looked away first. That's the danger of the harem. It's not passion that binds these women to you. It's ambition. Each one arrived here with hopes pinned to their sleeves, a family praying for favour. A child with imperial blood is not just a baby, it's a dynasty ticket. For the concubine, it's elevation. For her clan, it's power. And for the others, it's a threat, which is why jealousy in the harem can be lethal. There are stories, some buried, some whispered, of poisoned teas, tampered incense, accidental pushes on slippery stairs. One year, 4 concubines miscarried in a single season. The official records blamed stress, climate, bad luck. But no one believed that. The eunuchs heard the rumours. The Empress never commented. One particularly infamous case took place during the Tang dynasty, when consort Wu, yes, that Wu who would later become the only woman to rule China in her own name, was accused of murdering a rival's infant child and blaming it on the Empress. True? Maybe, maybe not, but the accusation was effective. The Empress was deposed. Wu rose, and history, well, made room for her. It's no different now. Every smile you receive is half performance, half negotiation. Every compliment masks a calculation. And still you're expected to walk this tightrope every night, choosing which concubine to favour without tipping the balance too far. You're supposed to inspire loyalty while feeding a system built on quiet betrayal. Sometimes you find yourself staring at the name tray as if it's a deck of fate cards. Who to please, who to punish, who to keep waiting just a little longer to stir desire, and above all, who can you trust? Tonight the answer seems to come with the rustle of robes. Lady Lana enters the hall where your calligraphy scrolls are kept, unannounced but not unwelcome. She kneels silently beside the brush table, pouring you tea without being asked. Her movements are careful, measured. She doesn't ask questions, she just watches. "You're quiet tonight," you say. She nods. There's nothing to say that wouldn't cause trouble. Smart girl. You hand her the brush and gesture to the parchment. Write something. She hesitates only a moment, then dips the brush in ink and begins to write. The strokes are steady, graceful. A poem, one you recognise. To compete for favour is to burn incense in the wind. Even the brightest flame can vanish in a breath. You say nothing, neither does she. For all the silk and scent and smiles, this is the only real honesty you'll get. A single shared moment of understanding, not just between emperor and concubine, but between two people trapped in the same gilded cage. When she finishes, you roll the scroll up carefully and tuck it away. Tonight you won't summon anyone, but tomorrow? Tomorrow the name tray will be heavier than ever. There's something about a secret that electrifies the air, makes it hum at a different frequency. You can feel it tonight, thick as incense smoke clinging to the corridors as you make your way toward the plum blossom courtyard. You don't usually walk this far into the concubines' quarters unannounced, and certainly not without your usual train of eunuchs. But tonight's different. Tonight, you're chasing a ghost story, or maybe trying to catch one. The rumours started quietly, as they always do. A low-ranking attendant saw someone, slipping through the halls past boy curfew. Someone not on the official logs. No name tag, no scheduled visit, just silk in motion. A figure moving like a concubine, but not any concubine the records acknowledged. By morning, 2 maids had been reassigned, a eunuch punished, and still no explanation was given. But you heard, and you asked nothing aloud. That was 3 nights ago. Now, as you move through the lantern-lit walkway, you wonder, what if it's true? What if someone is slipping through the cracks of your carefully managed pleasure machine? In a palace where everything is documented, scheduled, and double verified, could there still be room for a forbidden romance? You think back to earlier dynasties, when emperors occasionally broke their own rules and gave in to the thrill of actual longing. One tale, always whispered and never officially acknowledged, involves Emperor Xiaozong of the Song dynasty. The story goes that he fell for a palace musician, a woman not of noble blood, not ranked, not sanctioned for imperial touch. But he loved her anyway, in secret. They met at night in the perfumed shadow of the southern gardens. When the affair was discovered, he exiled the eunuchs who kept his secret and sent the girl to a convent. But legend says she left him a poem, stitched inside a sleeve, saying only, "The moon knows what the court forgets." Tonight you feel the pull of that same forbidden thread. You reach the courtyard and find it silent, empty but not dead. A few lamps still flicker by the walkways. The night wind stirs the willows gently, their thin branches tracing secret patterns against the flagstones. And then, just as you're about to turn back, you hear it. Soft laughter, not too far, definitely female, and not the practiced, delicate kind reserved for court. You move toward the sound like it's bait on a hook, heart doing something it hasn't done in a while, beating for curiosity instead of duty. You reach the edge of a shaded alcove and pause. Inside are 2 concubines, low-ranking by their robes. Simple, no embroidery, hairpins modest. One is seated with a book in her lap, the other kneeling beside her, adjusting a ribbon on the first's waist. The moment is intimate, but not sexual. It's friendship. Maybe more. You can't tell. They don't see you, which is rare. No one ever fails to notice you. But here, in this quiet, forbidden pocket of the palace, you're just a man in robes, standing where he shouldn't be. You back away without making a sound. As you walk back toward your quarters, you can't help but think, what else happens here that you don't see? What other secrets bloom like night jasmine in the corners of your empire? It's not just the concubines with hidden feelings. The court has known its share of scandal, affairs that could have toppled dynasties or did. Take Emperor Xuanzong of Tang and his beloved consort Yang Guifei. Their passion was so infamous it made its way into poems, paintings, and at least 3 political disasters. She was blamed, fairly or not, for diverting the emperor's attention while rebellion simmered. The Anlushan rebellion, to be exact. A catastrophic uprising that almost shattered the Tang dynasty. In the end, under pressure from his own soldiers, Emperor Xuanzong was forced to have her strangled. Her death became legend, immortalised as a symbol of love too powerful, too indulgent, too dangerous. A reminder that even emperors are not immune to heartbreak, or consequences. And then there was Emperor Ai of Han, who famously shared his bed with Dongxian, a male companion he adored so deeply that he once cut off his own sleeve rather than disturb Dong's sleep. That moment became so iconic that the cut sleeve still endures as a euphemism for male-male romance in China. Their bond was whispered about, romanticised and condemned, depending on who held the pen. But what's undeniable is the emperor's vulnerability. Love in any form made him less predictable, and predictability is what the court depends on. As you slip back into your chambers, the eunuchs rise to greet you, puzzled by your absence but none too well trained to ask questions. They begin the night's routine, offering the tray of name tags, lighting the lavender oil, unrolling the bedding. You wave them off, not tonight. They leave silently, the door closing behind them like the end of a song. You lie back and stare up at the ceiling again. There are so many stories buried in these walls, so many touches that history doesn't record, your own perhaps among them. Desire here isn't about lust, it's about defiance. Every forbidden touch, every unapproved whisper, every secret smile is an act of rebellion against the iron ritual of your life. And maybe that's why you find yourself smiling, just slightly, as the candle flickers out. Because somewhere in your palace someone is in love, and for once it has nothing to do with you. Morning sunlight slants across your calligraphy desk, catching the edge of a jade brush rest shaped like a curled dragon. You should be signing tax reform documents right now. Instead, you're thumbing through a scroll wrapped in silk the colour of old bruises. It's a copy of the secret instructions of the Yellow Emperor, a Taoist text so dense and esoteric that you once joked it would take a decade to understand and another to forget. It's filled with metaphors, rivers of breath, gates of jade, pearls of dew. But behind the poetry lies a singular obsession, dual cultivation. You've heard the phrase before. In the context of imperial duty, it gets tossed around like tea leaves in a pot. Advisors love to say it in that wise, vaguely conspiratorial tone, as though repeating it enough times will unlock immortality itself. But what is dual cultivation really? It's sex, yes, but it's not just sex, it's ritual alchemy, spiritual discipline. The merging of male and female energies to create harmony, not just in your body, but in the cosmos. It's also, if we're being honest, one of the most overcomplicated ways to avoid climax ever devised. Taoist masters insist that if practiced properly, dual cultivation can replenish your life force, clear your meridians, and increase your divine connection to the universe. But if done improperly, at best it's a wasted night. At worst, you age prematurely, lose your teeth, and start forgetting the names of your sons. No pressure. Tonight, you're scheduled to practice with Lady Kiao, a woman trained in the inner arts of energy circulation since the age of 8. She's graceful, calm, and disturbingly well-versed in phrases like breath-drawing, tsing, and essence containment. When she arrives, she's dressed not in sheer silks or perfumed robes, but in pale linen that looks more appropriate for a monastery than a bedchamber. Her hair is pinned simply. No jewellery, no cosmetics. This isn't seduction, it's sacred geometry. The eunuchs bow and leave, and the chamber door closes with a soft finality. You sit opposite her on a cushion, knees aligned, palms facing upward. She closes her eyes. You mimic her. And together, you begin the first phase, synchronized breathing. Inhale to the count of 7, hold for 5, exhale like you're releasing 1,000 years of ancestral trauma. After several rounds of this, your lungs are aching and your mind is a little fuzzy. She hasn't even touched you, and already you feel like you've aged and been reborn 3 times. Finally, she moves. Not toward you, but around you, tracing the air with her fingertips. She murmurs words in a dialect you don't understand. The scroll said this chanting invokes the celestial guardians of your vital organs. The lungs get a white tiger. The liver gets a blue dragon. Your reproductive system, that gets a laughing toad apparently. You're trying not to picture it. At last, she sits close beside you. Her hand brushes your forearm. The touch is feather-light but feels electric. This is phase 2, energy exchange. The idea is to let your yang, your active, assertive force meet her yin. Soft, passive, receptive. But if you do it too fast, the balance breaks. You have to build the charge gradually, like coaxing a reluctant phoenix out of its nest. The scroll is clear. The man must not release his essence. The woman may release hers repeatedly as this draws forth the hidden spirit of the dragon without draining the immortal spring. In other words, she can climax, you cannot. Welcome to Performance Anxiety Taoist Edition. You shift uncomfortably. Lady Chow senses it. She smiles faintly. You're thinking too hard, she whispers. Easier said than done when half your training involves muscle clenching, breath control, and imagining your spinal column as a ladder to the heavens. Still you try. Her movements are slow, meditative. The act itself, if it can still be called that, is less like lovemaking and more like a deeply collaborative musical performance. There are rhythms, pauses, flourishes, moments where nothing happens but the silence itself is charged. You're supposed to draw her energy into yourself, through breath, through proximity, through some imagined channel that no physician has ever located, but which the Taoists insist is more real than your spleen. You visualize it like the scrolls instruct, a golden spiral travelling from your lower abdomen, up your spine, over the crown of your head and back down again. No spillage, no heat loss, just an eternal recycling of arousal into vitality. It's beautiful in theory. In practice, it's hard not to think about the fact that you are still technically naked and sweaty and lying very close to someone who seems way more spiritually advanced than you. There's a moment, brief but real, when you feel something shift. It's not dramatic, no celestial music, no floating, but your heart feels lighter, your breath deepens, and for a moment, you stop wanting anything, you just are, fully present, fully still. Then the moment passes. Afterward, she dresses in silence. You offer her tea, she accepts. Neither of you speak about what happened or didn't happen. That's part of the agreement. Dual cultivation isn't about confession or praise. It's about refining yourself, removing desire by swimming through it, then letting it go. There are scholars today who argue this entire practice was mostly metaphor, a coded way to describe self-discipline and the mental focus, rather than a literal sexual technique. Others insist it was real, with entire manuals dedicated to postures, timings and breathwork. Some researchers even believe it functioned as a form of birth control, a state-sanctioned method to regulate heirs while pretending it was about spiritual harmony. You're not sure where you fall in that debate. All you know is that you feel different, not drained, not elated, just a little more anchored in your body, less like a figurehead, more like a person. Outside, the wind rustles the garden trees. The stars are sharp and cold above the palace roofs. You think of all the other emperors who tried to stretch their lives through ritual, to cheat time by mastering their urges. Did it work? Not for most, but maybe the point isn't to live forever. Maybe the point is to live, even briefly, with awareness. You blow out the candle. The last thing you see is the silk-wrapped scroll on your desk, still slightly unfurled. A phrase dances in the shadows before the flame dies. To master the self is to master heaven. Maybe so. You're standing on the moon viewing terrace, looking out over the Imperial gardens bathed in silver. The air tonight is brisk, almost sharp, cutting through the layers of silk that drape over your shoulders. Behind you, the red lacquered walls of the palace rise like a fortress of memory. But for once, the silence isn't suffocating. It's soothing, peaceful. You've had no visitors tonight. No Lady May, no Lady Lan Air, no sage-like dual cultivation with Lady Xiao. Just you, the moon, and your own overworked heartbeat. It feels good to be alone, except you're not. You hear the footsteps long before you turn. They're light, deliberate, measured, but not timid. And when you finally glance over your shoulder, you see a man approaching, young, elegant, and moving with a confidence you rarely see from anyone who isn't a general or a prince. He bows, deeply but without grovelling. He's dressed in scholar's robes, plum-coloured and understated, his hair tied with a single silver thread. He waits for your acknowledgement. You nod. This is Sima Jun, your newest poetry tutor. Officially, he's here to help you refine the lyrical balance of your seasonal proclamations. Unofficially, he's one of the brightest minds in the court, sharp as a blade and prettier than half the concubines. You've heard the whispers already. Eunuchs passing messages, courtiers raising eyebrows, palace artists sketching him from memory. He's the sort of man who ignites a room without saying a word, and he knows it. He steps beside you and looks up at the moon. Tonight is the 15th day, he says softly. The full moon, perfect for a poem or a quiet betrayal. You arch an eyebrow. Is there a difference? He smiles, only with the corner of his mouth. Not always. You're not sure when it starts, the shift, the tension, the way he speaks to you not just as emperor, but as equal. He quotes obscure Tang poems with ease, comparing palace duty to plum blossoms withering on a scroll. He says your writing is heavy-handed, strong brush but lacking wind. No one speaks to you like that, and somehow you don't mind. Over the next few days he visits more often, always under official pretense, readings, calligraphy, seasonal verse. But there's something behind his glances, something in the pauses between lines of poetry that feels like more than literary critique. You catch yourself watching the way he holds a brush, the way his sleeves slide when he leans over your desk. One evening your hands brush accidentally, and neither of you moves away. It's subtle, nothing explicit, but in the palace subtlety is scandal, and it's not without precedent. You've read the histories. You know about Emperor Ai of the Han Dynasty and his favourite Dongxian. The story everyone remembers is simple but powerful. One morning Dongxian fell asleep on the emperor's sleeve. Rather than wake him, Emperor Ai cut the sleeve off and rose silently. That gesture, gentle, wordless, absurdly romantic, echoed through centuries. The cut sleeve became a phrase to describe male love in the Imperial court, a whispered metaphor that blooms in poetry, in song and behind fans at midnight. Dongxian was promoted rapidly, made commander of the Imperial Guards by the time he was 20. His rise was suspiciously fast, and many in court protested, some out of concern, other out of jealousy. But Emperor A stood by him, publicly, privately, without shame. Records say their bond was unbreakable, until the emperor died, and then Dongxian, alone and unprotected, was forced to take his own life. Another reminder that in the palace, love is dangerous when it doesn't follow the rules. You've also heard rumours about other emperors, less well documented, more buried in euphemism. The emperor favoured his steward for evening conversation. He often requested the company of his cousin's son during moonlit banquets. These lines are scattered through official records like hidden ink, visible only if you know what to look for. Desire, when inconvenient, is redacted into suggestion. Even now, scholars argue over these histories. Was Dongxian a true lover or just a tool of favour? Was the relationship political, emotional, or both? Were these men rebels against social convention or simply victims of a system that allowed anything behind closed doors but demanded denial in public? No one knows for sure. But you know one thing. No one cuts off their own sleeve for a pawn. Back in the present, Sima Jun is sitting across from you, reading aloud from a poem he's just written. His voice is low, clear, intimate. If I were the ink, would you let me spill across your skin? Would you press me into permanence or blot me dry with silence? You don't respond, not out loud. The air between you is charged. It's not lust, it's not even such comfort. It's something far rarer in your world. Recognition. That night you don't summon a concubine. Instead, you have wine sent to your study. Sima Jun joins you. You read old poems, laugh quietly, and when the moon is at its highest, you lay your head down on your sleeve beside his and pretend for just one moment that this is all there is. No empire, no lineage, no scrolls, just two people breathing in rhythm, no words are spoken, no sleeve is cut. But you understand why Emperor Ai did it, and you know, if it came to it, you might do the same. Tonight the palace is quiet in that strange expectant way, like it's holding its breath. Outside the cicadas hum, steady and ancient, as though nothing in the world has changed. But within the walls of your chambers the air is different, thicker, richer. It smells of amber oil and plum blossom, with a trace of something else, an edge of anticipation, or perhaps tension. You're sitting at your dressing table, half-dressed, robe loosened, staring at the silk garments laid out for you by the eunuchs. Not for ceremony, not for court, for bed, not to sleep, of course. No one expects an emperor to simply sleep in his bed. Tonight the ritual is layered in silk and suggestion. This is one of the few evenings when protocol bends slightly in favour of performance. Not just the act, but everything around it. The clothing, the preparation, the pacing. Because in the Imperial Palace, even seduction is a procedure. You slip into a robe the colour of ink at dusk, its fabric soft as breath and lined in gold thread. It isn't meant to be removed hastily. It's meant to glide off section by section like the slow peeling of an orange, each layer a promise. Your hair is brushed back, long and clean, tied loosely with a single thread of red silk. The look is casual but engineered, effortful nonchalance. When the concubine enters, Lady Zhao tonight, you barely glance at her at first. That's part of the rhythm. Eye contact too early breaks the spell. She bows deeply, and her robe slides slightly off one shoulder as she does. Not an accident. The candlelight hits her just so, drawing out the sheen of her skin, her long neck, the embroidered plum branches climbing up her sleeve. Her face is carefully painted. Light rouge, lined eyes, lips stained like pomegranate seeds. Is not the face of a lover, is the face of a ceremonial offering. And yet there's a practiced humanity to her performance. She knows her timing, her angles. She's been trained in the art of anticipation. One moment too fast and the illusion shatters. Too slow and desire cools. There's choreography here, not unlike a dance, and both of you are performers. She begins with music. A servant enters briefly, sets down a guqin and leaves. Lady Zhao plays, just for a minute. A piece composed for the emperor of a long-dead dynasty, meant to evoke rivers in spring and the slow bloom of peach trees. It's quiet, restrained, perfectly elegant. When she finishes, she doesn't look at you. She simply sets the instrument aside and waits. Now it begins. She steps forward slowly, removing her outer robe as she walks. Underneath is a gauze layer, barely there, embroidered with silver cranes. Her movements are deliberate, sensual without being overt. This isn't about carnality, it's about suggestion, about letting the eye imagine what the mind isn't yet allowed to touch. The bedchamber is lit with only 2 lanterns tonight, one near the dressing screen, the other beside the bed. Shadows dance across the walls, soft and fluid. Lady Zhao kneels before you and unties the red silk from your hair. She doesn't speak. Speech is not encouraged during this ritual. The act itself, this entire process, is designed to feel sacred, less human, more celestial. For the Emperor, sex is not casual, never has been. It's legacy, it's symbolism, it's fuel for the empire, and in some dynasties it's theatrical. You think of Emperor Wu of the Han dynasty, who once commissioned a series of bedchamber scrolls not for instruction, but for ambience. Painted scenes of legendary lovers, mythical animals, clouds twining with dragons, all displayed on the walls like silent witnesses to the imperial act. Some emperors went further. Emperor Xuanzong allegedly held full moon pleasure ceremonies, where music, poetry and carefully staged erotic tableau unfolded like a shadow play before the main event. A fusion of art and arousal. But tonight is quieter. Lady Zhao rises. She touches your shoulder. Her fingers are cool, deliberate. Every move is calculated to echo something, a season, a poem, a memory. The silk of her sleeve brushes your skin. The robe slips from your shoulder. Her lips do not seek yours immediately. Instead, she traces the outline of your mouth with a fingertip, as if reminding herself that you're real. You are, but you're also something else. In this chamber, in this moment, you are the dragon, the axis of heaven and earth, the body through which the empire breathes, and she is the mirror, reflecting, softening, shaping that fire into something human. The act itself unfolds slowly, not like it does with Lady May, whose touch feels like affection, or with Lan Er, who trembles when you so much as exhale. Lady Zhao moves like someone born of incense smoke, fluid, ephemeral, always just out of reach. You wonder if she feels anything, if she ever has, or if she, like many concubines, was trained to become a mask rather than a person. Afterward, she rises without a sound, collecting her discarded robe and smoothing her hair. She bows again, even lower this time, and exits without looking back. The eunuchs will already be waiting outside to escort her. She'll be taken for inspection, for documentation, for bureaucratic archiving. Everything recorded, everything filed. As you lie back staring at the shifting lantern light on the ceiling, you realise something. You don't remember what her voice sounds like. You remember the notes of the guqin, the flicker of her sleeve, the way her gaze never quite met yours. But her voice? Nothing. In a palace filled with thousands of women, some of them will love you. Some will fear you. A few may even hate you. But many, like Lady Zhao, will simply perform. Not for you, but for the role you represent. The Emperor, the Son of Heaven, the man whose name they moan not for pleasure but for posterity. And you perform too. You sigh and reach for the scroll beside your bed. Not scripture, not edict. A poem. One line catches your eye. The silken robes may fall away, but still, no name remains. You wonder if that's about her, or about you. The next day begins with rain. Soft at first, a gentle tapping against the roof tiles, then heavier, until the courtyards are glossed in puddles and the walkways shine like black ink. The palace slows when it rains. Servants whisper more quietly, the eunuchs walk with extra care. Concubines watch from latticed windows, their reflections mingling with the drops on the glass. Even you feel the change, sitting in the study near a brazier, cloaked in a robe lined with fox fur, a cup of plum wine at your elbow, and an old scroll unrolled in front of you. Not just any scroll, it's from the Imperial archive, unlocked only by your seal, one of the more risque classified collections the court pretends doesn't exist. But it does. And inside this lacquered box, you find what you've been looking for, a collection of erotic art once hidden away by an ancestor with good taste and a lack of shame. Paintings, calligraphy, and woodblock prints, some delicate, some so explicit they make even you raise an eyebrow. This isn't court-sanctioned romance, this is lust caught in brushstroke. The first image is subtle. Two lovers under a silk canopy, half hidden, behind gauzy curtains, the woman's face flushed, the man's expression blurred. It's all suggestion, a foot peeking from under the blanket, hair dishevelled just enough to imply hours of pleasure. The lines are fluid, the style unmistakably late Ming. You know the artist Chen Hongshou, who painted human intimacy with the same detail he gave to immortal sages. His lovers aren't idealised, they're real. And somehow that's more provocative. The next scroll is less subtle. A woman on her knees, mouth open, hair undone, surrounded by jade ornaments that might be metaphors, or just very ambitious accessories. The man is barely visible, more a suggestion of anatomy than a full figure. The painter cared more about the curve of the woman's back than the expression of her partner, which is telling. You roll through them slowly, one by one. Lovers tangled in impossible poses, their limbs like silk ropes, their faces painted with either serenity or madness, sometimes both. Some images include captions, short verses, most of them clever, many deeply crude. The dragon coils where the lotus blooms, in silence thunder roars. You smirk. This art is not just decoration, it's confession, a secret window into what people wanted, feared, and dared to imagine. These scrolls were never meant for public display. They were kept in private cabinets, passed between trusted hands, studied by lonely scholars and mischievous courtiers. Some emperors collected them obsessively, others banned them outright. Emperor Huizong of the Song dynasty, an artist himself, famously commissioned a set of erotic paintings said to be so detailed that they included facial expressions for every stage of climax. He called it the 12 Chambers of Spring. The scrolls vanished during the Jin conquest, but copies survived in secret. You've seen one. The faces are unnervingly tender. You remember wondering if anyone ever looked at you like that, unguarded. Not as emperor, not as destiny, but as a body. Of course, not everyone viewed this art as mere fantasy. Taoist practitioners believed erotic imagery could stimulate spiritual balance. Some claim that viewing these works before bed enhanced dream clarity or even strengthened the Jing, the vital essence. There's a manual somewhere in the archive suggesting that placing a particular erotic scroll under one's pillow aligns the heart with the flow of heaven, as if heaven blushes at foreplay. And then there are the footnotes, literally. In the margins of one scroll, someone, likely a bored scholar, or an overzealous eunuch has written commentary. Not about the art itself, but about the implications. There's a note that reads, "The lady's expression indicates joy, but her eyes betray calculation. Is this not the true face of the harem?" You laugh aloud, bitterly, because it's true. You wonder what the women in these paintings felt, if anything. Were they painted from life, imagination, memory? Did the artist know their names, or just their bodies? Were they courtesans, palace maids, wives? Some scrolls show women alone, pleasure implied without a partner. Others show group scenes, elaborate, choreographed, bordering on absurd. And yet none of them feel fake. You think of Lady Zhao from the night before, how perfectly she moved, how little she spoke. You think of Lan Er's quiet pain, of Lady May's sweetness, of Lady Qiao's breath control mantras, and suddenly these painted women feel very real, not because of the sex, but because of the masks they wear, the same ones your concubines put on every day. You roll up the final scroll. It's different. No figures, just a robe crumpled on the floor and a poem written in tiny, precise characters. The robe remains, still warm from night, but where has the heart gone? No signature, no artist, just a question no dynasty ever really answers. Even now, scholars argue over the place of erotic art in Chinese history. Was it a private indulgence or a reflection of courtly life? Was it suppressed by Confucian ideals or preserved quietly under the radar? Some insist that these images offer a rare look at personal expression in a society that otherwise prized restraint. Others claim they were nothing more than fantasy, detached from the real experiences of concubines and lovers. But as you sit here, scrolls beside you, rain tapping at the windows, the line between fantasy and reality feels thinner than ever. You rise slowly, step to the window, watch the rain pool in the courtyard stones, filling the carved grooves like veins. Somewhere across the palace, a concubine is writing a poem. Another is staring at her reflection, wondering if tonight her name will be drawn. Somewhere a eunuch is sorting name tags, one hand trembling just slightly. And you? You're still thinking about that final scroll, the empty robe, but not the heat of the body and the absence of the heart. This morning begins with an odd request, delivered not through the usual line of officials, but whispered into your ear by the chief eunuch as he adjusts your robe collar. Your Majesty, the testers await. You blink once, then again. Testers? It takes a moment to register, and then, like a wave of mortification rolled in silk, you remember the virgin testers. Bizarre tradition, as ancient as it is disturbing, resurrected now by someone in the Bureau of Ceremonial Purity, who clearly has too much time and not enough shame. The eunuch bows, unbothered, as if he's just announced that tea is ready. You stare at him. Why? He bows lower. The Empress Dowager requested stricter protocols for confirming concubine suitability, due to recent rumours. Ah, of course, the rumours. That one of the lesser concubines may have lied about her status. That her maidenhood, once assumed, may have been a fiction. And since everything in this place, from astrology to offspring, hinges on bloodlines and appearances, now you get to participate in this ancient pageant of absurdity. It begins that afternoon in one of the side halls, quiet, curtained and cold. You're not there for the actual inspections, thank all the ancestors. That duty falls on a specialised team of elderly female attendants known formally as genuine matrons, informally as the Guardians of the Red Gate. Their task? To examine new concubines and confirm the presence of a certain anatomical sign believed to indicate virginity. It's awkward, it's invasive, it's wildly unscientific, but in the logic of the Imperial court it's sacred. You're led into a private chamber to observe the reports. The documents arrive on thick perfumed paper bound in red silk. Each contains a name, background, family credentials, and the matron's final verdict, often reduced to a single character. Pure or unclear. It's clinical, it's cruel, and it feels utterly disconnected from anything resembling intimacy. You glance down the list. There's Lady Wren, only 16, recently arrived from a noble family in the southern provinces. Her father sent 12 painted scrolls and a gold dragon hairpin with her. She's marked pure. Then there's Lady Ping, 17, daughter of a merchant turned minister. Verdict, unclear. You can already guess what'll happen. She'll be quietly removed from the rotation, her family politely shunned. No scandal, just silence. And then there are the footnotes. Oh yes, the matrons love their notes. Exhibited nervousness, one reads. Too knowledgeable in court etiquette for her rank, says another. One bold matron simply writes, eyes too bold, not suitable for innocence. You wonder if that's a scientific observation or just personal judgment dressed in incense. You're reminded of a tale from the Tang dynasty involving Emperor Taizong and a concubine accused of losing her virginity before entering the harem. She swore her innocence. A court astrologer was summoned to read her fate through the stars, while a matron rechecked the signs. After weeks of drama, she was declared falsely accused, but not before being confined to a meditation cell for 40 days. She bore the emperor a son years later, but her reputation never fully recovered. That son eventually became a general. History, it seems, enjoys irony. The whole thing is exhausting. You lean back in your chair, staring up at the ceiling, wondering who this benefits. Certainly not the women, not you. Maybe the matrons enjoy the illusion of control. Maybe the Empress Dowager enjoys the moral theatre. But for everyone else, just another layer of performance, purity as spectacle. There's a debate among modern scholars about this exact ritual. Some argue that the virgin testing tradition was never as widespread as the archives suggest, that many of these reports were fabricated or exaggerated to appease Confucian ideals. Others insist it was enforced ruthlessly, especially during the later Ming and Qing dynasties, when ceremonial rigidity overtook almost every aspect of palace life. It's hard to say. Records were meticulously kept, yes, but you've seen what happens when records are inconvenient. One thing is certain. The obsession with purity had nothing to do with respect for women and everything to do with control. A virgin concubine was considered more malleable, more spiritually potent, less likely to bring disease or disorder. Some Taoist texts even claimed that the untouched womb channels the yin most purely, making her an ideal partner for energy exchange. Because, of course, even metaphysical nonsense needs a scapegoat. And there was always a darker undercurrent. Among your ancestors, there were emperors who took the purity ritual even further. Emperor Yingzong of Ming, for instance, was known to interrogate concubines personally about their first dreams and earliest pulses, euphemisms for menstrual and sexual awakenings. One concubine reportedly fainted during questioning. The next day she was gone. Her family received a small box of silver and a polite dismissal letter. That was the end of her story. You flip through the remaining reports, face expressionless. But mind racing. How many of these women are terrified right now, kneeling in examination chambers, stripped of dignity and trying to keep their breathing even while old hands prod and scribble? How many of them just want to survive? Later that night, you sit alone in your study, no company, no concubine. You pull out an older poem, one of your own. Something you wrote years ago, back when the palace still seemed magical and mystery didn't yet mean danger. They enter like butterflies, wings folded in protocol, not knowing the net is velvet, but a net all the same. You think of Lady Ping, of the way her name will vanish from the rotation, of the way her eyes, probably very bold, will flicker one last time before she disappears into the palace fog. And you wonder, not for the first time, how many broken wings are fluttering in the corridors of your empire. Rain has given way to humid sunlight, and the palace walls seem to sweat with it. The courtyard steam as servants rush to mop puddles and sweep up the drowned petals of magnolia blossoms. Inside your halls, the air smells of fresh sandalwood and something fainter. Perfume, you think? Not from your usual circle. Something richer, muskier, meant to cling to memory. You're not surprised when a eunuch leans in and murmurs, "Lady Jen requests an audience." Privately. You nod. Of course she does. Lady Jen is what court poets would call a woman of formidable bearing. Not the youngest in the harem, nor the highest ranking, but she carries herself like someone who's studied the map of this palace and memorized every trap. Her beauty isn't delicate, it's striking. Cheekbones carved like glass, eyes like polished obsidian, and she knows how to use them. She arrives dressed in red, not crimson, not the pale peony shade worn by hopeful concubines, but deep vermilion, the colour of imperial sacrifice and power. She bows low, her back straight, neck exposed, every movement whispering intention. "Your Majesty," she says, voice smooth as lacquer, "I've been reflecting." That's never a good sign. She sits only when you gesture, And when she speaks next, it's not flirtation, it's strategy. You've given much favour to Lady Lan'er. Some say she's even been seen consulting with the Empress Dowager. You blink once, a loaded sentence, if ever there was one. You're not sure whether the second half is true or just bait. Do you say that? You ask, voice light. I say what I see, she replies, hands folded neatly in her lap. And what I see is that your Majesty may be too generous with women who lack foresight. There it is, the threat wrapped in silk. This is the other kind of seduction, punishment by pleasure. The quiet, calculated weaponization of intimacy. In the Imperial harem, favour is more than affection. It's currency, shield, sword and poison. To be chosen by the Emperor is to rise above the wolves. To be ignored is to bleed slowly. So some concubines, like Lady Jen, learn to strike first through gossip, manipulation, or something much more visceral. You remember the case of Consort Li from 3 reigns ago, who charmed her way to the Emperor's side in under a month, only to be found later as the architect behind a string of sudden illnesses among her rivals. The poisons were subtle, a dose of powdered lead in face cream, a tincture slipped into herbal tonic. Nothing that couldn't be explained by female fragility. She was caught only when her most loyal maid, in a fit of guilt or self-preservation, confessed everything to the palace guards. Consort Li was quietly removed. No records exist of her after that. Lady Jen is more careful. I would never presume to interfere, she says now, though you both know she's already interfering. But there are other women in this palace who offer more than silk and moonlit poems. Her fingers trail along the edge of her sleeve. You follow the motion, realising suddenly that she's wearing no jewellery. No bracelets, no hairpins, no distractions. Her only weapon is herself. And for a moment you remember why you first summoned her months ago. It wasn't her looks, it was her laugh. Dry, intelligent, just this side of cruel. You want to be seen, you say. She tilts her head, unbothered. I want to be remembered. A strange cadence follows. Then slowly she rises and walks toward you, not with the coy grace of someone trying to seduce, but with the certainty of someone presenting a gift or a demand. She kneels, not at your feet but beside you, resting her chin on your armrest. If your Majesty wishes, she says, I can make you forget every name but mine. You believe her, which is the most dangerous part, because pleasure in this palace isn't soft, it isn't romantic, it can be used to reward, to distract, to punish, to dethrone, and sometimes it's handed out like poison disguised as wine. You think of Emperor Wu of Han again, not for his military genius or immortality obsessions, but for his downfall. A favoured concubine, Lady Gaoyi, who gained such influence that ministers feared she might control the succession. Her sudden death was ruled a fever. Others claimed she was strangled in secret. One scribe, brave or foolish, dared to write in his diary, she knew too much of the Emperor's breath. That entry was erased. But you've read the fragments. Even now, modern scholars argue whether emperors like Wu were seduced or outmanoeuvred, whether concubines like Lady Jen were victims or tacticians. One historian calls the harem the empire's softest weapon. Another writes that the women were emissaries of ambition, wearing longing like lacquer. Both are probably right. You turn to Lady Jen and say softly, You're playing a dangerous game. Her lips curl. So is everyone here. I'm just better at it. When she leaves, hours later, the air still carries her perfume. Jasmine and something sharper, unidentifiable. You sit in the silence, surrounded by cushions that now feel like traps. Silk sheets that still smell like her skin. She was right. She will be remembered. But for what? Outside, the lanterns sway in the night breeze. Somewhere a eunuch places a red mark beside her name on the schedule. Somewhere another concubine hears the news and clutches her chest. The war of desire is quiet. It doesn't wear armour, it wears nothing at all. You're tired, though no one would dare tell you. You walk the same halls, breathe the same incense, and nod at the same people who bow so low they might as well be part of the floor. But beneath your eyes, the weight shows. In your bones, it lingers. Not the kind of exhaustion that comes from politics or paperwork, though there's plenty of that, but something deeper. The kind that seeps into your skin after too many nights of orchestrated pleasure, too many ceremonies disguised as intimacy. You are the emperor, yes, but lately it feels like you're also the kingdom's most overworked lover. The scrolls say that pleasure extends life, that sex, if properly managed, can channel cosmic energy and restore balance to the body. But none of the scrolls say what happens when it's constant. When every night you're paired with someone different, each encounter mapped and measured like a state function. They don't say what it does to a man when his body becomes the vessel of a dynasty, and his bedroom the beating heart of state ritual. The truth is, you're beginning to feel like a hollow drum, struck nightly, echoing endlessly, never quite full. And tonight you're scheduled again. You didn't pick the name. One of the high eunuchs, in coordination with the Empress Dowager and the Bureau of Conjugal Harmony, a real department with real records, chose Lady Rui. It's her first time. She's young, beautiful, hand-selected from a noble household for her gentle demeanour and excellent lineage. All you can think is, she'll be terrified. Or worse, too prepared. When she arrives, she's swaddled in midnight blue silk, her eyes cast down but her posture steady. The eunuchs perform their usual duties, confirming the time, logging the entrance, scanning for contraband. When they leave, you sit across from her, watching her breathe. She says nothing, neither do you. The silence stretches. Then almost mechanically she begins to undress. It's graceful, practiced, like she's rehearsed it in front of a Theatrical mirror 1,000 times. You realise she probably has. Her robe slides from her shoulders, revealing skin so pale it looks almost translucent under candlelight. Her hands tremble slightly, not fear, fatigue, and for a fleeting moment you wonder how many nights she's been kept awake just waiting for this moment. Trained like a soldier, polished like jade, prepared like an offering. You cross the room and gently take her robe from her, placing it aside. You meet her eyes. "You can speak," you say softly. She blinks. "I wasn't told that I should." You smile, not because it's funny, because it's honest and rare. What follows is slow, and not because you're savouring it, because you're trying not to rush her, or yourself. The truth is, you're tired, but there's something about her, this perfect stranger trained to be your momentary soulmate, that feels fragile. You guide her gently, your touch more comforting than commanding. No cosmic alchemy tonight, no breath-synchronized Taoist manoeuvring. Just two people lying side by side beneath silks that itch more than they seduce. And yet, halfway through the night, something strange happens. You fall asleep. Not immediately, not deliberately, but right there beside her, with her skin still warm under your palm and the candle guttering on the table, your eyes simply close. And when you wake hours later, she's still there watching you, her body curled inward like a comma. "Did I do something wrong?" she asks. "No," you whisper. "You let me rest." She smiles barely. You're reminded of Emperor Jianzong of Tang, a ruler so consumed by desire that he reportedly kept a rotating schedule of up to 15 concubines per week. His death, predictably, came early, found collapsed one morning in the embrace of a woman whose name didn't even make it into the official records. The cause? Sudden fatigue, which, as every historian knows, is code for he overdid it. Whether that's truth or cautionary tale depends on who you ask. One physician from the Ming dynasty, bold and anonymous, once wrote, "Too much joy drains the liver. The emperor must ration his passion like rice in a famine." The line was scratched out in later copies, but you've seen it in the hidden archives. There's a quiet rebellion in restraint. Of course, not every emperor agreed. Some pushed themselves past every sensible limit. Emperor Zhengde, also of the Ming, famously built a private pleasure palace within the Forbidden City called the Baofang, complete with secret tunnels, actors, musicians, and women disguised as anything from maids to soldiers. He drowned in a canal after a drunken night of debauchery. He was 29, and then there's you, still here, still breathing, but barely awake, barely real. In the following days you start saying no, not loudly, not officially, but you delay visits, postpone encounters, request solitude. The eunuchs grumble. The Empress Dowager takes notice. She calls you to her chamber, offers you ginseng, deer antler tonic, even as dragon bone dust, a rare and costly aphrodisiac said to restore not only virility, but imperial intent. You decline. She narrows her eyes. You forget what your body means to this empire. "I remember too well," you reply. That night you do something unthinkable. You request no company. The name tray arrives as always. You send it away untouched. The logs that night will show a blank entry, and tomorrow the palace will ripple with it. Some concubines will cry, others will scheme, the eunuchs will whisper. But for the first time in what feels like years, you lie down in an empty bed and let sleep come without effort, without obligation, without watching eyes. And it feels like freedom. Brief, but real. You hear the drums before you see the procession, low and rhythmic, echoing down the corridors like a heartbeat that doesn't belong to you. The sound draws you toward the Hall of Radiant Favour, one of the more opulent reception chambers reserved for high-ranking envoys and the occasional royal guest. Today it's being prepared for something rare, something that only happens a few times in a reign, and only if the stars align, literally. A foreign concubine is arriving. Her name is Sayuri, or at least that's the name written on the documents, though no one knows if it's her real one. She comes from across the sea, beyond the eastern borders of your maps, an offering from a daimyo of Nippon, Japan, where cherry blossoms fall like poetry and warriors bleed for pride. Her arrival is not just a gesture of goodwill, it's a declaration, a gift for the emperor, wrapped in silk and diplomacy, to secure favour, protect trade, and perhaps more covertly influence your ear. You sit at a distance watching as she is led into the hall. She walks slowly, head high, flanked by 2 interpreters and 4 eunuchs who look more tense than usual. Her robes are layered in cream and gold, her black hair pinned in a sculptural arrangement that must have taken hours. Her face is painted white, lips small and red like a single stroke of cinnabar. You've seen many beautiful women, but she's different. Not more beautiful, just unfamiliar, unreadable. She bows deeply, not the shallow court dip, but a full-body submission, forehead to the ground. Protocol, yes, but her stillness tells you this isn't just ceremony, it's performance. She's been trained, likely since childhood, in how to present herself as a prize. Her every movement is a blend of self-erasure and practiced allure. A paradox that makes your chest ache in a way you don't quite expect. You greet her through an interpreter, though it's mostly formality. She bows again, this time less deeply, and says one word in your tongue. Peace. It lands softly, unassumingly, but it lingers. Later, after the formalities are done, after she's been taken to the Pavilion of Fragrant Distance, yes, that's the actual name, you ask for her scroll. Every new concubine has one, a document detailing her lineage, health, education, temperament, and of course, suitability. Sayuri's scroll is frustratingly sparse, much of it redacted, or written in another script. The physicians note excellent health, the astrologers have been vague. Her horoscope is listed as auspicious but mysterious, which is about as helpful as predicting rain during monsoon season. Still, her presence causes a stir. The palace is already abuzz. Concubines whisper. Some are excited. A foreign woman might distract you, allowing others to move up in rank unnoticed. Others are jealous. Exotic beauty tends to rise quickly in the emperor's favour. Eunuchs debate how to address her in the logs. Even the Empress Dowager tightens her grip, sending a quiet reminder that non-hand concubines require careful monitoring. You can practically hear the fear in her voice. Sayuri is a wild card. But you're curious. When you visit her for the first time, it's not for anything physical. You bring translators and fruit and sit across from her in the moon garden. She says little, observes much. Her eyes linger on the koi pond, then on the calligraphy on your sleeves, then back to your eyes. It's not flirtation, it's assessment. She smiles once, and it devastates you. That night, you don't summon her. You don't summon anyone. You lie in bed thinking about how her silence felt louder than any conversation you've had in weeks. You wonder if she knows how lonely you are, or if she's just good at reading faces. You remember the way she held her fan so deliberately, half covering her mouth like a veil between worlds. You ask a historian later about other foreign concubines. He tells you of Lady Duan, a Korean noblewoman offered to the Tang Emperor as part of a tributary pact. She brought with her unfamiliar music, strange spices, and a court dance that sparked a whole fashion trend. But her favour rose too fast. The Empress branded her as culturally threatening, and she was soon reassigned to a Buddhist temple. The official story says she went willingly. The unofficial one says otherwise. Another tale from the Yuan dynasty tells of a Persian concubine who introduced rosewater baths and saffron desserts. Her influence was said to soften the emperor's heart, but when she bore a daughter instead of a son, she lost her privileges overnight. The palace loves novelty, until it doesn't. You start visiting Sayuri more often, always under the guise of diplomacy, of course. She teaches you words from her language. You teach her calligraphy. Her brushstrokes are clean, precise. She paints a scene of cranes flying over water and gives it to you without fanfare. You keep it tucked inside one of your poetry scrolls. The physical part doesn't come for weeks, and when it does, it's not the exotic storm you imagined. It's quiet, focused. She guides you with small touches, like she's mapping your body not for pleasure, but for understanding. Afterward, she doesn't ask for praise, doesn't cling. She lies beside you staring at the ceiling beams as if deciphering a code only she can see. You ask her once why she came. She says, "I was told I had a choice." You turn to her. "Did you?" She looks at you long and steady and says nothing. Somewhere in the Empire a treaty is reinforced. Somewhere a merchant gains access to your coastal harbours. Somewhere a court in Nippon receives word. The Emperor is pleased. The investment was worth it. But in your chambers, Sayuri lies beside you like a story half-rule. Red. You wonder what happens if you fall for her, and what happens if you don't. There's a peculiar stillness to the palace during the hour of the ox, somewhere between 1 and 3 a.m, when most souls are asleep, and the candles burn lower than they should, but haven't quite been snuffed. You're awake, not by necessity. There's no urgent military dispatch or divine omen scrawled in the stars. You're just sitting up in bed, robe pulled around your shoulders, staring at the lacquered screens that separate you from the rest of the world, or rather from the illusion of it. You hear a faint cough from the shadows, one of the attending eunuchs shifting position. He's meant to be invisible, as always, but tonight you're hyper-aware. The way your life has become a theatre has never felt more obvious. Even now, even here, nothing is private. Not the way your breath catches in the night, not the way your thoughts circle back to Sayuri and the faint echo of her footsteps after she left your chamber yesterday. Even your sighs are noticed, logged in the unspoken language of service. It makes you wonder how much of your pleasure has ever been real. You glance at the bed. No concubine tonight. Your own request. But that doesn't mean the court isn't spinning its stories already. You can practically hear the speculation. The Emperor's favouring foreign blood, the Emperor's defying the Empress Dowager, the Emperor's weakening, and worst of all, the Emperor is choosing love over duty. But love has nothing to do with this. Tonight it's about truth, or rather, the lack of it. You've been thinking about the performances, not just the ones in the Grand Opera Hall or the annual spring banquet, but the performances that unfold nightly between silk sheets, the ones no one names. You think of Lady May, cooing sweet words with downcast eyes, always just a beat too late to feel natural. Of Lady Jen calculating her moans like chess moves. Of Lady Chow whispering cosmic metaphors while her hands slid with mechanical grace. And even Sayuri, who gave nothing away, not out of coldness, but because perhaps she knew better. It's no secret in the palace that concubines are trained to simulate pleasure. Not just to flatter, but to survive. A concubine who seems disinterested risks being passed over. One who shows too much eagerness might be labelled manipulative, but one who can walk that razor-thin line, pleased but not demanding, emotional but not burdensome, she gets remembered. Sometimes rewarded, occasionally exalted. There are manuals, actual Incon Silk guides, some written for the women, others for the eunuchs who supervise them. You've seen them. You're the Emperor. You see everything eventually. One such scroll, titled The Art of Harmonious Nights, details proper vocal tones for different ranks. High consorts should be softly melodic with restraint. Lower concubines, gentle but enthusiastic to suggest sincerity. The guide even includes breathing techniques to mimic arousal, recommended facial expressions, and phrases to utter at climax, if climax occurs, which is not always necessary. You remember reading that last part and nearly laughing. Of course it's not necessary. For them, climax is optional. For you, it's a matter of health reports and spiritual interpretation. Because here's the other layer of absurdity. The Emperor's pleasure is observed, not visually, thank the ancestors, but administratively. If you're seen to be too exhausted after nightly encounters, the court physician is recorded as essence depletion. If you seem unusually energetic, they attribute it to harmonious yin-yang flow. You've even had eunuchs note in the morning reports that His Majesty looked restored today, as though your mood is a thermometer for the Empire. And the women? Their roles are no easier. After each visit, the concubine is escorted to the inspection pavilion. There she is bathed, examined, and asked a series of questions. Was the encounter agreeable? Did any discomfort occur? Is there reason to suspect a pregnancy? These answers are logged. Not for their sake, of course, for yours. And yet you know intimately how much of it is fabrication. There was once a girl years ago who confessed something to you mid-embrace. Her name is long gone from the rotation now, but you remember her eyes, wide, scared, and too honest for the room you were in. She whispered, "I don't feel it, I just pretend." You stopped. You held her face in your hands and asked if she wanted to leave. She nodded. You made it happen, quietly. Gave her a post at the Temple of Tranquil Blossoms, a place where former court women go to become invisible in peace. But not everyone speaks. Most just smile, gasp on cue, arch their backs because they were taught to, not because they want to. And you play along, because what choice do you have? Even your pleasure must be performative. You get up from the bed and walk barefoot to the window. The palace is silver in the moonlight. Somewhere far below, a night watch bell chimes twice. You wonder if any of the concubines are still awake. Maybe Lady Lana, scribbling poetry by candlelight. Maybe Lady Jen, scheming. Maybe Sayuri, staring at the ceiling the same way you did last night. You think again about the manuals, the guides, the whispered advice, the way desire in the palace has been choreographed, packaged, and managed into submission. Modern historians, centuries from now, will argue about this. Some will insist that imperial sex was cold and mechanical, a duty like any other. Others will claim there were real moments of passion buried beneath protocol. A few bold ones may even suggest that the concubines found power in performance, that faking it gave them control. You're not sure where you stand, but all you know is this. You have been touched by hundreds of hands. And yet how many have truly known you? You return to bed, but not to sleep. You lie still, breathing, listening, wondering if tonight someone else, somewhere in the palace, is pretending to dream. By mid-morning your chambers smell like deer musk, dried ginseng, and the sharp metallic tang of crushed horn. Not exactly an ideal breakfast combination, but no one's asking your opinion. The court physicians have delivered their latest concoction. A tonic rumoured to restore vigour, fortify yang energy, revitalise the Imperial dragon. That last part is said with such reverence that no one even laughs, though you can tell one of the younger eunuchs nearly cracks a smile. You sip it anyway, because you're expected to. The potion tastes like someone melted an herb garden into a bowl of ink. Thick, bitter, a little smoky, as if it's trying to remind you that the fire within must be stoked. You grimace and set the bowl aside. That's when the Grand Physician bows low and begins his monologue. Something between a diagnosis and a pep talk. Your Majesty's pulse is slightly wiry, he says, stroking his beard. A sign of internal wind, likely due to emotional strain, but the colour of the tongue is healthy. This is encouraging. You raise an eyebrow. The colour of my tongue is encouraging? He nods solemnly. Very. And with continued treatment, the effects of fatigue may be reversed, especially if paired with the right women. Ah, there it is, the not-so-subtle nudge. This isn't the first time the Imperial Medical Bureau has prescribed sex. In fact, there are entire medical treatises dedicated to the idea that regulated intimacy strengthens not just the Emperor, but the entire empire. If your energy flows harmoniously, they say, the crops flourish, the floods recede, and the barbarians on the border mysteriously forget their aggression. Sex, in this logic, is medicine. Not lust, not affection, but a treatment plan. You've read the manuals. Some of them are centuries old, passed down from physician to physician like sacred scrolls. They describe the optimal positions for energy transfer, the recommended rhythms per dynasty, and even the number of thrusts based on your age, season, and liver health. During spring, more yang, vigorous movements. During autumn, gentle, reflective, not more than 9 thrusts before switching positions or partners. Apparently your kidneys have opinions. One scroll from the Tang dynasty declares, "To sleep with one woman each night brings peace to the heart. To sleep with 2 in moderation strengthens the blood, but to sleep with 3 invites chaos to the spleen." You don't know about your spleen, but you can confirm that 3 concubines in one night causes paperwork. Of course, none of these practices exist in isolation. Everything is connected. Medicine, astrology, Taoist philosophy, even politics. Your physicians consult the astrologers before issuing a prescription. The Empress Dowager reads their reports like tea leaves, and if she believes your qi is out of alignment, you may find yourself suddenly scheduled with a consort you haven't seen in months. Not because you want her, but because the stars think you should. Lady Ming was one of those. She came to you once, years ago, after the astrologers insisted her metal element could stabilise your wood element. The logic of it was baffling, but everyone nodded as if it made perfect sense. You barely knew her name. She was kind, soft-spoken, and her hands trembled when she touched your robe. You did what was expected. She later wrote you a poem you never answered. But her presence had been recorded in your medical chart. Even now, modern scholars debate whether these medicinal sexual regimens were ever truly about health, or whether they were just elaborate justifications for indulgence. Some argue that the constant pressure to perform actually shortened emperors' lives. Others say the rituals helped enforce discipline, allowing rulers to spread attention without attachment. A few fringe historians suggest that the entire system was a way for the palace elite to monitor your moods without seeming intrusive. After all, if your favourite concubine reports you looked pale during lovemaking, the court knows to prepare a backup heir. Your own experience? Somewhere between exhaustion and obligation. Today the physicians present a new item, Yang Restoring Pellets, a formulation said to include deer antler, seahorse, powdered pearl, and trace amounts of bear gall. You wonder how many animals had to die so you could possibly feel a little less tired at bedtime. The instructions suggest taking 1 pellet an hour before intercourse, followed by meditation and slow breathing. As if you have time to breathe slowly these days. You wave them off with a courteous nod. The tray of supplements remains untouched. Later, you're seated beneath the ginkgo trees in the inner courtyard, watching the leaves shimmer like gold coins in the wind. Lady Chow joins you, summoned not for sex this time, but for tea. She understands your sense, sips her cup without speaking, and then reaches into her sleeve to produce a tiny scroll. "Read this," she says. It's a page from an obscure Taoist manuscript you've never seen. The title, The Way of the Empty Vessel. The passage reads, "The Emperor must not seek pleasure, for in the seeking he is already diminished. Let pleasure come like a breeze, unexpected and brief, and let it pass without capture. In this he becomes the stillness that guides the world. You stare at it for a long time. So I should do nothing, you say." She shrugs. "You could try it. Nothing seems to be the one thing you're never allowed." She's right. That night the eunuchs come with the schedule. The name tray, the tonics, you wave it all away. No herbs, no appointments, no carefully timed yang balancing sessions, no counting your breaths, no aligning your spleen with your libido. Just silence. Just rest. You lie in bed, hand on your chest, feeling your own heartbeat. No one observing, no performance. And for once, that's the medicine you need. It begins with a whisper, as these things always do. The kind of whisper that doesn't travel through kriyas or scrolls, but between screens, in the shadows, passed like a secret between perfume-scented hands. A rumour, a concubine has been talking in her sleep, about you, about state secrets, about things you never said aloud outside the bedchamber. You hear it from your chief eunuch, who delivers it the same way he delivers everything. Bowed, quiet, eyes on the floor. Lady Xing, she spoke of the southern garrison, of your Majesty's troop movements near the Yangtze. He hesitates, which is rare. She also repeated your Majesty's private words from 2 nights ago. You go still. It shouldn't surprise you, not really. The Imperial bed has never been sacred. It has always been a place of strategy, not safety. Pillow talk is rarely just talk, and yet the intimacy of betrayal, disguised in a moan, sealed with a kiss, still cuts deeper than the edge of any assassin's blade. Lady Xing is soft-spoken, demure, a middle-ranked consort known for her embroidery and quiet poetry. She came from a family with minor titles and a reputation for loyalty. Nothing remarkable, nothing threatening, which makes her the perfect spy. You summon no one that night. Instead, you sit alone in your study, recalling every word you've ever said in the aftermath of sex, and not just with Lady Xing, with Mei, with Lanner, with Sayuri, things you've muttered while still half dreaming, things you thought were safe to share in that hazy space between exhaustion and surrender. But nothing is safe in the palace, least of all vulnerability. You think of past emperors who fell to whispers. Emperor Cheng of Han, who let his favourite Zhao Feiyan and her sister Zhao Hede dominate the court not through official channels, but through overheard secrets and manipulative affection. His mother, the Empress Dowager, hated them, saw through their silken masks, but the Emperor didn't care. Not until Hedda poisoned herself and Feiyan was left weeping with no more power than the embroidery on her sleeves. Or Emperor Zhaozong of Tang, who confided in a concubine about his plans to escape the eunuch regent's control. She told her maid. The maid told a eunuch. The eunuch told the regents. Days later, the Emperor's plan was crushed before it could begin. That concubine was never punished. Because officially, nothing happened. History is full of women who heard too much. You've had suspicions before. Once, years ago, you awoke to find Lady Rui still in your chambers at dawn, despite every rule that requires concubines to be escorted out by the fifth watch. You asked her why she lingered. She only smiled and said, "I like to listen to the way you breathe when you dream." You thought it was poetry. Now you're not so sure. There's a term among the eunuchs, Zhentu Feng, the pillow wind. A secret carried between lovers, always fragile, always deadly if caught. It's said that the greatest spies don't hide in shadow. They lie beside you, brushing your hair off your forehead and asking, "And what troubled you at council today, my lord?" You look back now and see the pattern. The way some women ask questions only after sex. How their touch shifted from warmth to calculation the moment your eyes fluttered closed. You don't blame them. Not really. The palace teaches ambition before it teaches affection. Some historians argue that concubines wielded their greatest power not through seduction, but through information. That their ears, not their bodies, were the sharpest tools they possessed. A concubine could learn which official was falling out of favour, which policy was being delayed, which general had grown too bold, and that knowledge, filtered through servants or lovers or family, could tilt the balance of entire provinces. And you've made the mistake of assuming silence meant safety. Now you have a choice. You could banish Lady Xing. Exile her to a quiet temple in the mountains where no one would hear her secrets. You could strip her rank, shame her family, make an example. Or you could do nothing. Let her think you haven't heard the whispers. Watch her. Feed her false information and see where it flows. Use her as a mirror to find the cracks in your walls. You choose silence. Instead, you write her a poem. Something gentle, non-threatening. The kind of gift emperors send when they're pleased. It says nothing and everything. Petals fall in the dark, but the wind remembers where they landed. You sign it with your private seal. 3 days later, you hear that Lady Xing has become suddenly ill. She refuses food, she avoids the baths. Her maids report that she weeps in the evening, reciting poetry under her breath. She knows. That's enough. You make no formal announcement. She remains on the records, but her name no longer appears on the night tray. She lingers at the edges of banquets, dressed in softer colours, her hair unadorned. Her fellow concubines begin to avoid her. No one wants to sit too close to a woman marked by imperial silence. And yet somewhere, someone is still listening. Because the night after her illness begins, you wake to find your inkstone moved, your scrolls rearranged just slightly. Not carelessly, not like the maids would do. You rise, walk to the door, and find a small scrap of silk tucked behind the frame. It reads only, "Even the wind bows to the throne." You burn it without reading it twice, but the message is clear. You are not alone in your bed. You never were. You wake before dawn not because someone calls you, but because your dream ends with a tiger biting your hand. Not violently, just a steady, impossible pressure. You open your eyes with your fingers curled and your palm tingling as if something sacred passed through you while you slept. The room is still dark, the shadows long and lazy, but you sit upright anyway, knowing the dream will stick. Your dreams have been strange lately, filled with animals, fire, mirrors that don't reflect your face. The court astrologers would say it means imbalance in your spirit. The Taoists might say you've lost alignment between your dragon energy and your root breath. But you know what it is. You're tired, and everything, body, soul, kingdom, is starting to leak at the seams. But the tiger stays with you. It prowls your thoughts as the eunuchs dress you, winding your belt 3 times, straightening the jade clasp, dabbing your temples with dew-soaked cloth. They ask if you want the incense today. You shake your head. No perfumes, no disguises. Your first appointment is with a visiting Taoist alchemist, a man who claims to understand the 3 treasures of the body: Jing, essence; Qi, energy; and Shen, spirit. He kneels, head bowed. then rises and presents you with a scroll bound in black silk. The title reads, Methods of Animal Vitality. You raise a brow. He launches into explanation. According to him, many emperors before you have lost their edge by ignoring the lessons of the animal spirits, celestial creatures that represent various aspects of male virility. The tortoise for endurance, the crane for breath, the deer for fertility, and the tiger for primal strength. Your dream, he insists, is a message from the tiger. You nod politely. He takes this as encouragement and continues. He recommends a new practice, Huben Gong, the tiger's root method. It involves strict sexual abstinence, consuming powdered tiger bone mixed with ginseng and pine resin, and reciting chants to awaken your inner beast. You can't tell if he's serious or just incredibly committed to the performance, but either way, he leaves you with a clay jar filled with something that smells like dried mushrooms and regret. You've heard of this before, not the specific tiger method, but the general belief that animal strength can be absorbed. Some emperors insisted on drinking tiger blood, or wearing undergarments made from leopard hide. One Ming emperor kept a live black panther, chained outside his bedchamber, claiming its presence helped him retain essence through fear. That emperor, by the way, died at 42 with 3 legitimate heirs and 15 nervous breakdowns. And it's not just tigers. The palace is filled with symbolism. Dragons, of course, you are one by birthright. But also cranes for immortality, turtles for wisdom, rabbits for quiet fertility. Some courtiers believe the presence of certain animals near the palace, crows, foxes, serpents, can signal shifts in fortune. Others rely on metaphors, the emperor's dragon, the empress as phoenix, concubines as swans, foxes, or peonies depending on their perceived virtue. But none of them talk about the tiger. The tiger is too wild, too honest. You start to notice him in other places. A silk tapestry above your bed shows a tiger with a crescent moon behind its shoulder. A painted screen in the hallway depicts a hunt. You there in youthful glory about to strike a tiger with a spear. You remember that day. Not because of the kill. Because the tiger didn't run. It just stood there, staring as if waiting for you to decide whether you were predator or prey. That's the truth of it, isn't it? You're not the hunter anymore. You're the hunted. Every night, women enter your chambers with practiced grace. They bring their bodies, yes, but also their ambitions, their family legacies, their schemes. They lie beside you, sweet-voiced and powdered, eyes lowered just enough to signal submission, but never all the way. And you, still playing the role of dragon, feel your strength drip away night by night. Either you perform, you please, you endure. But inside, the tiger is pacing. You think of a story once told to you in childhood, about Emperor Liu Bang, founder of the Han dynasty. Before his rise, he dreamed of a white tiger licking his chest, and a seer told him it meant he was destined to consume kingdoms. Later, as emperor, Liu Bang surrounded himself with women but withdrew from physical pleasure, claiming he needed his tiger strength for war. Some say it gave him the clarity to hold his empire. Others say he died miserable, clutching a silk slipper and whispering the name of a concubine he never allowed himself to touch. Which one will you be? That night you surprise your attendants. You decline all name trays. You order the bedchamber doors locked. No one in, no one out. You light no candles. Let the moon provide what little it wants. And you sit, legs crossed, back straight, hands resting on your knees. You try the chant the alchemist gave you. It sounds ridiculous, like a cough and a growl arranged into syllables, but you keep going. Not because you believe in magic tiger energy, but because doing something that isn't sex, isn't politics, isn't performance feels holy. Hours pass, you feel your breath slow, then steady, then vanish into something quieter than silence. The tiger doesn't appear in a vision. No lightning strikes the roof. But in your body, something shifts. Not strength exactly, stillness, a sense of being made from stone and wind at once. You remember what it felt like before the throne, before you belonged to everyone. Just you, in the body of a boy, running barefoot through a courtyard you weren't supposed to enter. The next morning your attendants find you asleep on the floor, blanketless, hair tangled, face calm. You wake slowly, rub your eyes, and smile at the confusion in their faces. Send the alchemist a bowl of sweet rice, you say, and tell him the tiger sends his regards. They bow and hurry off. You don't believe in transformation. not in the way myths tell it, but you do believe in the animal that lives beneath the robes, and today he's awake. The drums are slow today, not ceremonial, just the ordinary heartbeat of palace life echoing through its stone belly. You're seated at the western pavilion, watching the court ladies sweep fallen wisteria petals into quiet piles. The sky is overcast, that soft silver that makes everything look like a memory. One of your ministers is speaking to you about border grain distribution, but his voice sounds like it's coming from the next room. You nod at the right times, you lift your tea and sip, but your mind is elsewhere. It's where it always drifts these days, toward the question you've been trying to ignore. What happens when pleasure becomes a liability? No one dares say it out loud, but the signs are clear. You've begun to lose control of the rhythm. Concubines no longer wait for selection. They angle. They send gifts, cryptic poems, silk fans stained with perfume and innuendo. Your eunuchs pass you notes with folded corners, hints from women who once waited quietly but now lean forward, hungry-eyed. The scent of desire, once sweet and soft, now stings like vinegar. You wonder when it changed, when your indulgence stopped being a right and started being a weakness. Maybe it was gradual, maybe it was the night you fainted after a banquet and woke with 3 court physicians arguing over whether your pulse was too fast or just spiritually distressed. Or when the Empress Dowager, eyes sharp as splinters, placed a hand on your shoulder and said, "You should remember that the Emperor's strength is not infinite." That was weeks ago. Since then, the rotation has only grown longer. More names, more appointments, fewer moments to breathe between. You're not a man anymore. You're a furnace, and the Empire is feeding you wood by the cartload. You think of Emperor Xuanzong, who reigned during the height of the Tang dynasty, a ruler known for his brilliance and patronage of the arts, but also for his obsession with consort Yang Guifei. She was said to be the most beautiful woman in the empire, but her influence ran far deeper than her looks. Ministers courted her favour, family members were elevated to power. Eventually, rebellion swept the empire, and when the court fled the capital, the soldiers refused to continue unless Yang was executed. Xuanzong, broken and weeping, gave the order. Was it love that doomed him? Or just too much pleasure, too often for too long? Pleasure, unrestrained, becomes rot, and you can feel it in your own palace now. Your ministers, once deferential, have begun pausing longer after their requests, as if testing the edge of your disinterest. The Bureau of Harem Affairs sends its daily reports later and later, as if assuming you'll be too preoccupied to notice. And the Empress Dowager, she has stopped asking if you need help and started offering it uninvited, a quiet coo wrapped in motherly concern. You remember another cautionary tale, Emperor Ai of the Han, who grew so besotted with his male favourite Dongxian that he neglected court business entirely. It's said he once cut the sleeve of his robe rather than wake Dong when he'd fallen asleep on it. The gesture became a euphemism, the passion of the cut sleeve, sweet in poetry, disastrous in policy. Dong was later executed. The emperor died young, alone and mocked. You've never cut a sleeve for anyone, but the rot comes all the same. That afternoon, you visit the Imperial archive. You don't go through the usual gate. You slip in through the west wing, alone except for a single eunuch who knows how to stay invisible. You find the scroll you're looking for, the private logbooks of Emperor Yongle, a ruthless man, effective, feared. His harem was enormous, but he kept strict rules. No visits on consecutive nights. No woman saw him twice in the same lunar cycle unless summoned by edict. His sexual regimen was so disciplined it resembled military training. One line from his diary stops you cold. An emperor who loses himself in softness will drown beneath silk. You close the scroll. That night you cancel all visits. The eunuchs blink, confused. The concubines fidget. The Empress Dowager is notified and sends a servant to ask if you are ill. You respond simply, "No, I am recalibrating." You eat alone, walk the courtyard alone, sleep in silence. You wake before dawn and meditate not on dragons or cosmic energy, but on withdrawal. You repeat this for a week. The palace shifts. At first, it's confusion, then discomfort, then panic. You notice things. The way Lady Jen watches you now, not with desire, but calculation slightly misfired. The way Sayuri bows more deeply, her eyes unreadable. The way Lana sends a poem but doesn't sign it. You sense the gears turning, the whispers spreading. "The Emperor has withdrawn." Some call it illness, some call it enlightenment. The Empress Dowager calls it a temporary realignment of imperial responsibility. But you call it what it is. A test. What remains of your court when you stop playing its game? Who dares speak up when there's no body to flatter? And how long before the silence exposes the lies? Late at night, you walk the empty corridors, listening to your own footsteps echo. Somewhere in the east wing, you hear two maids arguing softly about which consort has fallen most from favour. One says Lady Qiao, the other says Lady Xing. Neither knows you're 3 doors away. You smile. You're beginning to see again, to feel the shape of the palace beneath the perfume, the silk, the moaning, beneath the rot, because indulgence makes you blind. And now your eyes are open. Your footsteps echo through the hall of retiring clouds, a place once reserved for ceremonial farewells but now half abandoned. Its echoing corridors cluttered with dusty scroll racks and wall tapestries faded by decades of incense smoke. You used to come here as a boy, slipping away from your tutors to press your fingers against the dragon-etched panels, imagining what it would feel like to be powerful. Back then, you thought emperors were gods, untouchable, eternal. You had no idea that someday you'd sit on the dragon throne and feel more like an actor than a sovereign, and even less idea that now, in the twilight of your reign, you'd be walking through this old hall wondering where all that power actually went. Because something's changed, not just in you, in the air, in the silence of the palace that used to buzz with rehearsed seductions and stifled giggles. The harem is quieter now, fewer names appear on the night tray. The Empress Dowager has stopped sending veiled suggestions about which lady needs your attention. The eunuchs bow more carefully, the concubines speak less. No one knows what to do with a sovereign who refuses to play his part. The withdrawal was supposed to be temporary, a reset. But it's turned into a reckoning. You're beginning to notice the women who are always invisible. The ones who never sent poems, never wore elaborate hairpieces, never fought for the front row at the spring banquet. Like Lady Nuo, who walks with a limp from an old riding accident and spends most of her days tending a miniature herb garden in the corner of her courtyard. Or Lady Chen, who teaches the younger girls needlework not because she has to, but because it quiets her hands. And even Lady Xing, who once betrayed you in whispers but now seems haunted by her own silence. These women weren't trained to seduce. They weren't built for performance. They've lived in the margins of your desire. And now, in the quiet, they emerge not as temptresses, but as people. You visit Lady Nuo one afternoon. She's startled when you appear. You've never been to her chambers before. She offers tea with shaking hands, stammering through the formalities, until finally you ask her to stop. Tell me something real, you say. She blinks. Like, what? Something no one else would tell me. She thinks for a long moment, then, the ginkgo trees by the north wall, your gardeners have trimmed them too much. The leaves won't last through the first frost. You stare at her. It's the most honest thing anyone's said to you all week. You laugh. And she laughs too, timid at first, then full. It's not seductive, it's not calculated, it's human. And you realise, painfully, how long it's been since you were spoken to without motive. Later you sit with Lady Chen. You don't touch her, don't undress her. She tells you how she once tried to escape the palace, not with a ladder or a disguise, but by pretending to be mad. I thought if I muttered enough poetry and stared at my food like it was on fire, they'd send me to the Temple of Quiet Waters. Did it work? You ask. She shakes her head. They just moved me to the coldest room. You almost reach for her hand, but instead you thank her. The concubines are watching now, not with jealousy or longing, but confusion. You're breaking the rules of the game they were born into. Without the structure of seduction, without the rotation and the hierarchy and the sweet poison of imperial favour, the system starts to collapse. Some panic, others retreat. A few adapt. Lady Lan'er sends a letter requesting permission to join the Imperial Library as a copyist. You approve it. 2 more women follow her. Lady May asks to teach painting. You assign her to the Artisans' Hall. One girl asks to leave entirely to return to her family. You let her go with a carriage and 10 bolts of brocade. The Empress Dowager says nothing, but her silence has begun to tighten like a noose. You've become unpredictable. Unpredictability is dangerous. You're reminded of the last emperor of the southern song, Zhao Bing. A child, really, but an emperor all the same. Fleeing from the Mongols, carried on the back of loyal generals, shuffled from island to island. When all hope was lost, his final attendant picked him up and leapt into the sea. a desperate act dressed in loyalty, or perhaps just an escape from the weight of being a symbol too young to understand it. You're not a child, but sometimes you feel no freer than Zhao Bing. The irony is sharp. You were taught to command armies, write poetry, administer land, read the stars, but no one taught you how to say enough. Not to the court, not to the harem, not to the hungry god of performance that lives in every corridor of the palace, and now that you have, they don't know who you are anymore. Neither do you. You walk the palace at night, alone, robe-dragging, hair unbound, a ghost of your own legend. You pass by the Eastern Chamber, where Lady Jen once pressed her lips to your ear and told you she could make you forget every other name. You remember how many nights you believed her. But now you remember them all. Every woman, every performance, every lie told in soft candlelight. And you carry them with you, not as shame, but as truth. Because desire is not evil, but unexamined desire, that is a prison. And you've finally found the key. Morning comes quiet, the sun filtered through the silk screens of your chamber in pale gold. No drums, no summons, no clatter of trays or murmuring eunuchs at the threshold. Just a breeze carrying the scent of sweet osmanthus from the south gardens, and the realization that, for the first time in what feels like years, your first waking thought isn't about duty, or performance, or which concubine is waiting in the hall. It's about the sky, about the sound of your own breath, about stillness. You rise without assistance. The eunuchs, accustomed to a slower rhythm now, enter only after you call. They dress you in a simpler robe, undyed silk with no embroidery, no gold-threaded dragons wrestling among clouds or us. Just fabric, just breath on skin. When the Empress Dowager hears that you've requested no court meetings today, she sends you a note in her own handwriting. Are you preparing to abdicate or simply learning how to disappear? You don't respond. You spend the morning in the pavilion where artisans once embroidered your ceremonial cloak. The women have all been dismissed for the festival, so it's empty now. Dust motes drift lazily through the shafts of light. You sit cross-legged on the dais and stare at the walls where your own image once loomed, painted, gilded, flattered by brush strokes into godhood. And you begin to write. Not a decree, not a confession, just a letter to no one, or maybe to all of them. To the ones who waited in silence, to the ones who faked ecstasy with trembling fingers, to the ones who whispered lies because it was the only way to be heard, to the ones who touched me and wondered if I was even there. You stop, start again. You were never invisible. I was, hidden behind robes and rituals and roles. I was a man trapped in the costume of a god, and I asked you to believe in me when I no longer believed in myself. The ink dries slowly. You fold the letter and tuck it beneath the floorboard of the dais, knowing it will likely never be found. But it's not for them, it's for you. Later you walk the harem one final time, not as emperor, not as lover, just as a man saying goodbye. Lady Chao is painting a branch of plum blossoms with such care that you hesitate to interrupt her. She looks up and smiles, and you simply nod. Lady Chen is sewing again, her fingers precise. She doesn't look up, but you catch the twitch at the corner of her mouth. Lady Nuo's garden has begun to bloom, tiny green shoots curling from terracotta pots. She gestures towards one. "This one's for you," she says. "It's bitter root. Strong, ugly, but useful." You thank her. You reach Sayuri's quarters last. She is packing a lacquer box. Not to leave, just to clean. You sit beside her on the tatami mat and help fold her silks. Neither of you speaks for a long time. Then she says, "When I first came here, they told me the Emperor was made of gold and fire." You exhale softly. They lied. She nods. "Yes, but I think they meant you were impossible to touch." You turn to her. "Am I still?" She doesn't answer, but she leans into your shoulder just for a moment, and then returns to folding. At sunset you climb the eastern tower, where the view stretches beyond the palace walls to the river, to the flickering rooftops of the city, to the hills rising in the distance like sleeping beasts, the same hills your ancestors looked at, the same ones your sons might if you choose to let them. The wind is stronger up here. Honest, you breathe it in. You don't know what kind of emperor history will call you, perhaps indulgent, perhaps disillusioned, maybe just tired. But you do know this: you are no longer ruled by desire. You've survived its sweetness and its poison. You've survived the 1,000 hands that reached for you with longing, calculation, fear, and hope. And now, you reach back only when you choose. No scroll can record that. No historian can measure it. But somewhere deep in the bones of the palace, where stories grow between stones and silk, your name will hum differently now. Not as a dragon, not as a god, but as a man who remembered how to be still. The moon rises slow and full, casting long silver ribbons across the roofs of the inner court. You're not in your bedchamber tonight. You're seated beneath the old ginkgo tree near the lotus pond, wrapped in a simple cloak, hair unpinned, watching the lantern sway on the breeze. Somewhere across the city, a bell chimes for the last watch. In the stillness you hear it all, the crickets in the reeds, the soft swish of silk as a nightmaid crosses the stone path, the distant hush of water trickling from a jade spout. There are no concubines tonight, no tray of names, no footsteps pacing in hopeful rhythm outside your doors. The women are still here, of course, but they no longer orbit you like moons caught in gravity. They have their own tides now. You've given them that, not out of mercy, but because you needed it too. You once thought power was having everything at your fingertips. Bodies, silks, whispered adoration. But now, in the hush of this night, you realise it's the opposite. Power is choosing what to hold, and what to finally let rest. You exhale and feel the breath go all the way down. Let the ministers squabble over lineage. Let the scholars debate your legacy. Let the poets romanticize you or not. You've seen the inside of desire. You've watched it shimmer, bruise and peel away. And now, at last, you can sleep. You close your eyes, not as emperor, not as dragon son of heaven, but simply as yourself. Alone, but not lonely. Still and entirely awake.